Metallica, here they come, the kings of metal.
So fucking what?
This is Ray Burton, and you're listening to Metal Up Your Podcast.
Bass solo, take one.
Welcome to Metal Up Your Podcast. I'm Ethan Look.
And I'm Clint Wells.
This is episode 138, and this is our exclusive interview with old Scott Pingel, the double bass player from the S&M2 concert that has recently happened, who did a stunning and, I think now, unforgettable performance of Anesthesia.
No, it's definitely made its way into sort of one of the coolest performances in the entire Metallica story.
Right.
And I want to note here that we've signed... We signed a proximity clause with Scott. He is no longer able to give any other interviews, not only to any other podcasts, but any other human being or news outlet.
This is it. So,
literally for the rest of his life.
sorry, Regis.
I was so surprised that he was so willing to sign that document.
Yeah, that is crazy. Yeah, I mean, unless we're the last one to do an interview,
Everyone's gotten to it before us.
Everyone already did it. Yeah.
I've been avoiding S&M2 videos because, and this is no knock on anyone who's been watching them, but those videos never look or sound great. And I want to wait another month.
Right.
We're going to see it in the theater, fully produced by Greg Fiddleman.
Yeah.
However, I've treated myself to a few small things. One was the Unforgiven Performance with James just singing. Too. I did do that. But the other one is Scott's performance. And It is an emotional performance. It'll bring a tear to your eye. Mm-hmm. It's pretty unanimous in the Metallica community that it's a beloved performance already. Right, it just happened a couple weekends ago. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of feedback from a lot of our listeners who were at one or both shows who said I shed tears during that moment. Like I shit tears during that moment.
And then I had to go to a doctor immediately.
Yeah, it's crazy. I couldn't even stay for the part where he kicks on the distortion pedal.
Well, Scott's an accomplished musician. I'm sure it's not it's a very coveted position probably to be in the San Francisco Symphony, prestigious symphony, and he's a world-class musician. We're really lucky he was able to make time for us. I do believe that he was flexible with our schedule. His wife is helping with their kids, I believe.
Oh, man.
So we need to thank his wife first and foremost, and then, of course, Scott for his time. And like we do whenever we have guests, we have the patrons ask Scott a bunch of questions. How many questions did we get from the patrons? Like 15 or so?
We got about 10, I think.
10 to 15?
There was a few submissions with multiple questions in there, and I kind of cherry-picked the best one.
Yeah, we kind of have to just whittle some of those down for time and stuff. So we're going to be talking to Scott here shortly. We're going to ask him all the things that you're curious about.
Yes.
What was the preparation like? What was the rehearsal like? How did it come to be that he played this homage to Cliff?
Right,
Was he a Metallica fan? What's his favorite Metallica record?
Have you heard of Metallica?
How do you spell Metallica?
Do you really know how to play bass?
It's been going viral this week. This chick that was wearing I believe it's an Injustice for All shirt.
Oh yeah, she didn't know
and she was asked to name
songs?
She was asked to name one.
Yeah, well, I think the first guy said, "Can you name three Metallica songs?" And she's like, "No, I can't." And then the host, I think he's like, "Can you name one?" I could if I heard it.
If he sings it or something.
He tried to, and he jokingly just kind of stopped, as if like he probably doesn't know any either.
Now, you and I have talked about this. My official stance is anyone can wear whatever they want, and it's cool with me.
Totally.
The life's too short and crazy and filled with sadness and pain for me to be an asshole about that. Will I wear a shirt of something I don't know anything about? Probably not.
Probably not.
It's not really for me. I'm not going to wear a band shirt that I don't know about.
Yeah, because I mean, oftentimes when you do wear a band shirt, you might see someone else, at the coffee shop, at the mall, if you're shopping or something. And, it's kind of like driving the same car, somebody, you kind of, a little nod, but sometimes it strikes conversation. It's like, oh, dude, that's a kick-ass shirt. Like, what's your favorite song on that record or whatever? I wouldn't walk out in public with a shirt of an artist I didn't know anything about. And unless it was a clear joke.
And it is a cringy moment. I mean, we retweeted it with the facepalm emoji.
Yeah.
But we're not the type of dudes that are very begrudging about that.
I don't
think you and I are very snobby about it.
I mildly roll my eyes. Or oftentimes if my wife and I are running errands and I see somebody in like some like cool Instagram-y girl or something, like
an influencer, if you will.
In like a Misfits shirt, I look at Callie and I go, name me 3 songs.
Right.
That's just kind of an ongoing joke.
Right.
But I wouldn't actually walk up to that person and be like, hey, listen here. Let's talk about their discography.
I don't think I would ever, ask them to actually name the songs. Because what does that leave you with when they can't? Haha, see?
Yeah, gotcha.
And then you're the asshole that does that.
Yep, absolutely. the closest thing that ever happened in regards to that subject is at my local coffee shop I go to, which is amazing, called The Post. Go check it out, everybody. I had one of my Metallica shirts on and just walked in there, normal morning, grabbed my iced coffee, was headed home. And it was a new person working, and they're like, whoa, that shirt. I go, yeah? They go, that's hilarious.
Hilarious.
And I kind of chuckled a little. I go, what's hilarious about it? Like, oh, it's just kind of like ironic. And I go,
I don't know if he knows what the words hilarious or ironic mean.
I think you're right. I told him, I was like, I don't know. I'm a big fan.
That shirt's perpendicular, bro.
Whoa, that thing is very vertical. It was just weird. I just that's all I could think to fire back with was like, I don't know what's so funny about it.
Yeah, I don't understand. I love comedy and humor.
Yeah. I would love to be in this situation though on the receiving end. If I was walking down the street, and someone's like, "Hey," if I had my Damage Inc. shirt on, like, "Hey man, like, are you really a fan?" Like, yeah, I am. Like, name me 3 songs. Like, I think my response would be, name the name of my podcast about Metallica.
Here would be my response. I'm not going to name 3 Metallica songs for you. I'm going to name 175 Metallica songs for you in the order in which they were written.
I'm going to name all the songs they haven't played live.
I am curious to hear what Scott's history with Metallica was before this whole thing. And
absolutely.
I know that everyone's excited to talk to Scott, so we're going to get to that too as well. Here's the deal, though. We've got a lot of listeners. We've got a lot of fans all over the world, Ethan. We are international.
All over the world. And I've seen this firsthand in London with our meetup.
Same here. And we have a responsibility to these people, and we have some housekeeping to do.
We do. It's time to clean up a little bit.
Now, the first thing we'll say is we have a Patreon, we have iTunes. Easiest way to support the show ever is to tell your buddies about it. The second easiest way, though, is to go to iTunes and leave a positive review. Doesn't matter what country you're in. If you don't listen on a way that has iTunes, I don't know how you can do that. I don't know if you can leave reviews on Stitcher.
I don't know.
You can just like and subscribe. We're on all the socials, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Come follow us on all that shit. We have a lot of fun over there.
MySpace, Friendster, all those. We're on,
LinkedIn is probably where we get the most traction.
And our next podcast contest is you can be one of our top 8 friends on MySpace. Ooh. So look forward to that.
For a limited time only for about 12 hours.
Yeah, that's it.
If you want to get involved on a deeper level, of course, the Patreon, patreon.com/metalupyourpodcast. Kevin Van Dam made a very nice comment because our interview with Chad Z, James's Guitar Tech, is already on Patreon, even though that episode is not going to be available to the public for probably another month, maybe. And
might I say real quick?
Yes.
A huge round of applause for Clint Wells for conducting the interview on his own. I had a session thing that came up that I couldn't get out of, and Clint grabbed the reins and led that steed into battle.
Well, needless to say, we missed you. It's just that I've been emailing Chad on and off since January.
Yeah, it's been a while, yeah.
And I know that they're about to go to Australia, and so they just came home from Europe, and now they did S&M2. So
right.
the windows can close really quick. So, and I'll say this for everyone who's interested in that interview: that's going to be one of our coolest episodes.
Awesome. Chad
was so likable and informative, and incredibly generous with his information. Right. And I believe in my careful hands as a questioner, as a host, made him feel really comfortable. I didn't get the sense at all that he felt guarded about anything. He talked very openly about James, about getting the job, what the job's like,
cool, good
and bad. He seems very grateful for the work he does. He likes Metallica. He's a fan, and
it's awesome.
It was a really cool. It's exactly the kind of interview that me personally, as a fan of Metallica, would love to hear.
Very cool.
And I want all of our listeners to know that as we inch our way towards talking to the boys, that will always be our number one goal, is to ask them the questions that fans want to know the answers to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
We're not journalists. We're not industry insiders. We're fans.
We're influencers, too.
Well, we are influencers. Yeah. But, that interview is on Patreon, and I did want to... Kevin Van Dam said this, which I thought was really sweet, about the Patreon. He said, as I find this, as I look through my phone, he said, I support or have supported many creators on Patreon, and there's still no better value on the entire site than Metal Up Your Podcast.
Wow.
Which is really cool.
That's really cool. Thanks, KVD.
So, it's $5 a month if you can spare it. If you can't, we totally get it. I mean, I've had seasons of my life where I literally could not afford that, but it is available over there. We got 4 or 5 new patrons. Ethan's going to read their names right now.
Yeah, we got some new ones. You have Kylie. We have Oliver. This is a tough one. Mornenweg. Jason Berkowitz and Daryl Friars.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
We love the patrons.
We appreciate
it. At the very
it.
least, you get a shout out on the immortal show, Metal Up Your Podcast, which will live on in the ether and the internet long after we're gone, Ethan.
But will it live on?
In the portals!
In the portals of time.
Please, 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 when the show ends, please take our hard drives, send them through thine portals.
In thine portals as well, you'll find the drives that are hard.
Then
all of a sudden, Torben shows up.
A really good friend of mine and the other guitar player in Rodney's band, and a really smart, cool dude who likes Tool and great music and all this.
Yeah.
When he was in his high school days, was a massive Magic the Gathering guy.
Yeah.
He did all that crap. D&D, Magic like all of it.
Yeah.
When we get riffing on that voice on the bus, just the sheer vocabulary he can pull from.
Oh, I'll bet.
Just from all the culture of that shit.
Well, even just the names of all the
cards and the magic.
And, yeah, totally.
Dude, it's pretty funny.
Phone Ferris on... I can't even make up one.
He says Mortal Coil a lot, which
Mortal Coil.
The Mortal Coil!
I heard a funny thing. Who was it? I can't remember. It had to do with vampires, and someone said something about vampiric fortitude.
There we go. I would like some of that.
Yeah, vampiric fortitude sounds tasty.
When I was a kid, I loved horror movies, as I still do.
Yeah.
And I guess in many ways I still am also a kid.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what a lot of the... I didn't really understand a lot of what was happening in vampire movies. I just liked vampire movies.
Yeah, they were fun.
And one night, I was in a big car with my family going out to eat, and my older cousin, who I thought was the coolest guy in the world, and some of his friends, who were also very cool to me, who wanted nothing to do with me because I was a little 6-year-old nerd.
Right.
And I was, for some reason, pretending to be a vampire in the car. And no one was liking it. No one was like, oh, this is funny. Everyone was like, will you please quit being weird and pretending to be a vampire?
Was it one of those, like, were you doing like the voice, like, I want to suck your blood? Like,
exactly. But even shittier. Like,
Oh, I'm a vampire. Oh,
I'm creepy.
They're like, fangs.
They're like, will you stop doing that? Stop what? Being what I am, a vampire? But one of my big slogans that I shouted out, which I had seen in the movies, but no idea what it meant. I went, I am not a virgin.
Not knowing what that even meant.
Well, because vampires had to kill virgins, you know what I mean? There's an obsession with virginity in a lot of these old horror movies.
Yeah, totally.
And I just remember the whole... I didn't know what it meant. I just know it was some kind of badass shit that vampires say. Like, I want to kill the virgin. And the whole car erupted in laughter, but I could immediately tell it wasn't the kind of laughter that makes you feel good.
Yeah, it wasn't like, I hit that one out of the park.
It wasn't... It was distinctly...
Immediately, like, what does virgin mean?
Yeah, whoops, I definitely said a word that triggered this car into laughter.
Yep, absolutely.
Anyway, there's that story for everyone forever.
Yeah.
We get emails all the time, metalupyourpodcastshow@gmail.com. We love to hear from the family, check in. Patreons, the patrons get priority access when we read them. We like to read 5 a week, and this week's no different, Ethan. We're going to dip right now into what we like to call the email corner.
Okay, our first email is from Cody Farmer. He says, started recently listening. I'm enjoying the show so much. I started back from episode 1. I've burned through about 30 or so, and I love it. That's cool.
Very nice.
Here's an idea I think would be fun. We like fun things.
I love fun shit.
I love fun things on T-shirts. What if you set up an NCAA-style bracket putting Metallica albums against each other and had a guest on with each person voting on who moves on in each round of the tournament, or maybe even setting up some type of fan poll for a couple rounds. Love the show, and by the way, I'm not offering any free beers because Clint shit talked Kentucky in one of the early episodes. You guys are the shit, Cody.
What did I say about Kentucky?
I don't remember that early on. I don't know. Could it have been the inception of Pawpaw or something? Like, well,
I mean, could it have been that Kentucky sucks?
I don't know. I like Kentucky.
I mean, Kentucky's fine.
Louisville's an awesome town.
Louisville's all right. Lexington's all right.
I think Louisville is a really good town.
No. Would you ever live there?
Yes, I would.
Okay, well.
I would live there.
Oh.
I've just, outside of playing shows, I have spent a lot of time there. I really enjoy it.
Let me say this. Let me for Cody and whomever else.
Okay.
I think Tennessee sucks. I do not like living in the South. I've been here my whole life. I'm from Alabama. And I always imagined that at this stage of my life, I would be somewhere else. But Nashville is...
Like Transylvania.
I'm not a virgin. I'm very grumpy about destination. I think Nashville's great. Nashville is a wonderful city in a really horrible state. And I hate the values of the South, and I feel no connection to it whatsoever.
Right.
And Kentucky's just part of that for me. I don't give a fuck about Georgia. I think the coolest city down here is New Orleans.
New Orleans is pretty awesome.
My wife just got offered a job making twice the amount of money, but we'd have to move to Atlanta. That conversation lasted about 6 seconds.
I would never live in Atlanta.
You see what I'm saying?
No offense to it. Well, Atlanta to me, it reminds me of like the southern version of LA.
Now,
it's massive. There's way more traffic than we'll ever have in Nashville. It's just... I love living in the South. I do like a lot of things about the state. I'm with you on the values of Tennessee.
But you like the South in a way that you're from California.
That's the thing.
You grew up in Southern California in probably one of the coolest places in America.
Right.
And you came here, and now the South to you is like, it's like quaint and cool and interesting and different. And
yeah. See, I've spent most of my moving years downsizing in cities.
Right.
So it's like I grew up like just south of LA, and then I moved in Orange County. Then it was like this little smaller beach town, San Clemente. Then from there to Nashville, and I don't know. I like getting outside the city and going to like on hikes to, me and wife go to find like waterfalls or whatever, go out to the lake and kayak. I love that stuff.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, there are nice things about the South, I suppose.
Right.
There's beauty here that's cool, but there's a lot of green beauty in Connecticut and in New England and the weather in the Pacific Northwest and Southern California. My favorite city in the country is San Francisco. So hopefully Scott Pingel, after we have this conversation, they will invite me and my whole family to come live with him.
I probably will. Yeah.
But here's what's most important about this whole thing. And I know Cody was just being fun because he says you guys are the shit. I love people everywhere. I don't care where you're from.
Right.
There are good people and there are bad people everywhere in the world. And so it's not personal if I don't like Kentucky. But believe me, I've been there lots.
Yeah.
And it's not spoken from ignorance. It's, in my opinion, from personal experience. Also, it reminds me of the time that I was at Mercy Lounge. Did you ever used to go to Mercy Lounge?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Ton.
I never go there anymore.
I used to go to Mercy Lounge before we had that roundabout right there. Remember, that whole street never existed. Remember that?
Oh, I don't.
To go from East Nashville to the Mercy Lounge, you had to you went over the bridge and then made a left on 4th and kind of bobbed and weaved through a bunch of shit. Now you can just go straight, hit the roundabout, and you're at Mercy Lounge.
Oh, the roundabout on Korean Veterans, the bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't remember when that wasn't here, but I do remember being at Mercy Lounge. It was packed on the back porch, which was packed. Dude, it's the smallest porch ever, but everyone would go out there and just talk and smoke and get away from the loud music. And they had like a hot dog hamburger guy out there.
Yep.
And I remember it was so packed, like you literally, you just couldn't move. It was like being at a packed punk rock show.
Yeah.
And like Brittany from Alabama Shakes was out there, and everyone was fucking going crazy.
Oh my God.
And I remember talking about how much I hated Memphis.
Yeah.
And this guy turns around and is like, "You want to say that again?" And he's literally wearing a shirt that says, "I love Memphis."
You want to say that again?
And you know what I said? I said, "Yeah, dude, I think Memphis sucks. I see that you're wearing I see that you're very proud of Memphis. Chill out, dude."
If I didn't know you and I heard you say something like, man, fuck Orange County, blah, 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 I'd probably agree with you, actually, but at least some of it. But or even now, I've lived in Nashville currently 14 years. And someone said, "Man, fuck Nashville." I wouldn't be like, "What'd you say, motherfucker?"
I would ask why. Like, oh, why?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like, "Say that again. I guess you didn't know I'm from a little town called Nashville."
It'd be different if somebody was like insulting my wife.
Well, of course.
That merits that reaction.
But the thing is, if someone said, if someone like vehemently hated Nashville, I would just be curious. Why? I would be exactly as curious if someone was like, "Oh my God, Nashville is just heaven. I love nothing more than Nashville."
Yeah.
I'd be curious about that too.
Say that again.
Like, really? Why?
What do you love about it, motherfucker?
Anyway, all that to say, thanks for the email, Cody. Yeah. Now, we're having to take a little bit of a detour on the emails. because we printed out some redundant emails here.
You don't have to say we. I did it.
No big whoop. Chad Walswick, who I believe is a patron from last week, he wrote in, "Hello, podcast," and I believe he's doing that Mega Dave. By the way, update from Dave Mustaine. He is doing really well.
Yeah, it's on the up.
He's on his last round of treatments, and all of his doctors are saying that everything looks really good
That's
for
amazing.
remission.
Great.
So congrats to Dave Mustaine.
Hell yeah.
And in honor of his progress medically, I'm not going to do the voice.
Perfect.
So hello, podcast. Wow, guys. So a couple months ago, I got a new job, I do some traveling, was looking to fill in some drive time, been meaning to check out the podcast for a while. I have some chapter buddies who've listened for a long time and even heard about the chapter from a comment section of Metal Up Your Podcast and recommended the show. He says, "Damn, I'm in deep now, and I almost feel like I need to apologize for not being on board previously. Glad to say I'm a supporter now. No need to apologize, my babies.
Come on, baby.
We're just glad you're here.
Hey, keep it cool.
We don't judge when you get on the train.
Be cool.
We're
be
just glad
cool.
you're on the train, baby."
That's right.
He says, "I've been so deep into Metallica for over 3/4 of my life, a bit offline during the shaky Saint something years." Saint Anger, by the way.
Oh,
couldn't
right.
remember, I
I
guess.
guess. Saint Lulu.
He says, "Somehow I convinced my parents to let me go see my first concert in 1989 on the Damaged Justice Tour when I was only 12.
Hell yeah.
Been to a handful of shows throughout the decades. In the last couple of years, I met a bunch of diehards and black ticket holders from all over, which has made the whole Metallica thing even cooler. Anyway, I've mostly dug into the early episodes of the podcast, but jumped up to some recent episodes, and it's cool to hear how the show has evolved.
It has.
Very sad to hear that the What Really Gets My Dick Hard intro is left that really got my dick hard.
Oh, my.
We never should have had that.
It just kind of seems... I remember I made that intro.
And we liked it.
I think it was the night we recorded our very first episode. I'd made it before you came over. I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? Took a clip from each record because I just thought it was funny.
But that was when the only people who ever heard us was me and you.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know if we ever thought that tens of thousands of people would listen.
We did that for like almost 100 episodes.
By the way, we're coming up on 1 million downloads.
It's insane.
Wow.
The platinum. Platinum downloaded
Will
podcast.
James Hetfield be delivering my platinum certificate
I think once we go diamond, he will.
I think the change we made is good.
I think so too.
I appreciate that some people liked it, though.
Oh yeah, for sure. I actually prefer the new one we have.
I do too.
Yeah.
He ends his email by saying, "We'd love to talk sometime if our paths cross. Beer and pizza or burgers on me. Not for Ethan, who's a vegan and not a virgin."
Uh-oh. You don't know that. I don't have any kids. You can't prove it.
That's actually true. Callie, Paul.
Paul.
He goes on to say, "Hit me up if you guys happen to swing through Fargo on your touring. I'm the chapter head for chapter 518, Fargo the Bell Tolls." Wait,
Fargo the Bell Tolls.
weren't those guys at our party?
It sounds like it. I mean, it sounds familiar. And I wish we got this email last spring. I was in Fargo for 2 days.
I was in Fargo.
Isn't it like Fargo? We call it Fargo Vegas. It's like, it's crazy.
I'll tell you, talk about getting like weirdly angry about where you're from. I hate it when people call Nashville Nash Vegas.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's the worst.
Most people that live here don't call it that. I had a friend.
No one who lives here calls it that.
Right.
0%.
Right. Maybe people that just moved here, they're from like LA, and they're like, "Oh, I love Nash Vegas." Read about it in some dumb magazine. I had a buddy who I am pretty damn close to, touring musician from Dallas. He is playing here tonight. I didn't know because I've been out of town. I get a text and said, "Yo, dude, playing." This is the other one I hate.
East Nasty?
No, playing Nashy tonight.
Nashy? I've never even heard of that.
Nashy, I don't like that one.
You need lotion? My legs are a little nashy.
I just think that if you don't live in Nashville or maybe you're new to Nashville, all those names sound fun. It's like, Nash Vegas, Nashy, Cashville or whatever.
Cashville?
That's actually the name of a hip-hop record of a guy from Nashville.
Here's what I've never done in any city I've ever traveled to, ever. And I've been traveling to cities for 20 years.
Yeah.
I've never taken the name of it and put some sort of hip abreve on it.
You know who?
Let's give a few a shot.
You know who doesn't say Frisco? People from San Francisco.
I have called San Francisco San Fran.
Some people will say that, or like in California, we never said I live in SoCal. Some like bros and surfers do. I never said NorCal or SoCal. I never did.
Thank God. I have said Cali before.
Chi-Town. That one sucks.
Nope, never done it.
I don't like that. One of the only cities which
I've never called New York the Big Apple. Sincerely, never.
Yeah, I do it jokingly.
Right.
The one city in America that I can honestly say I don't feel uncomfortable calling it by its abbreviated name is Philly.
Philly, of course. Philly's the first name of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the nickname.
Philadelphia is like the surname.
I've done Philly.
Yeah, Philly, I think gets a pass.
But I've never called it like Chili Philly. I've never been like
Chili Philly.
or whatever. I've never tried to put a weird rhyme on it. And I've never been like, well, hitting up the Windy City this weekend.
Yeah.
What?
Hot Atlanta.
Never done it. Not one time. Gross. What are some other ones? Boise, am I going to Boise?
Oh, Boise. Or I've never said like,
I've never said I'm going to Salt Lake Shitty.
keep Portland weird. That's more of a slogan or something. But
That's Austin,
But they
too.
have it painted on their fucking buildings.
Austin has a keep Austin weird vibe,
Yeah.
too.
We should paint inside of my house that says "Make Nashville Weird."
Yeah, make Nashville weirder.
I wish it was more weird.
Well, we're at Tangent City here at the
Yeah,
top.
we really
If
are.
Scott and his beloved family are listening to this episode waiting to get the interview, I'm sorry. You may want to fast forward
just
about
go
15 minutes.
Exactly. Sorry. To the
Well,
family.
thanks for the email chat, and of course, thanks for hopping on the Patreon train. It really means a lot to us.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to talking with you some more later, homie.
All right, next email is from Mark Waple. He says, "Hey guys, I am sad to say I have only just found your show, but I'm stoked to say that I've just found your show and I love it." He's sad and happy.
Wow,
That's cool.
Life is not black or white, Ethan. Life is. You know what? The band Live has a song called "The Beauty of Gray."
Wow, I love gray. Now gray is my favorite color.
I love the Counting Crows.
impersonation. I got to chatting to an American guy called what? What's so funny?
I just love the idea of you at like a party. Like that's one of your things is an Adam Duritz impersonation.
I only
and it's just you saying gray's my favorite color.
It's like the only line on that song. I've never been a big Counting Crows guy, and I always
That's Mr. Jones.
I know, I always hated that song.
Man, that's a wonderful song. Great lyric.
Hey man, another term I listen, Clint, agree to disagree. Okay, we already disagree, so we don't have to agree to it.
You don't think that's a good song?
It's okay, it's fine. Maybe I overheard it back when it came out or something, but that was the line that always whenever it came on the radio, it was like, "Now gray is my favorite color."
There it is again.
And I was like, "What the hell is this?" Oh, jeez. I haven't made Clint laugh this hard in a while.
I've just had such a long day, man. I'm just glad to be not doing what I was doing today.
All right. Anyways, Mark Waple says, "I got chatting to an American guy called Chris in the early morning queue for the Metallica show in Munich. I think I know who this Chris is. Chris Poland, former guitarist of Megadeth. I believe Chris Duritz, Adam's brother." Clint just took a drink. He can't swallow.
Gray's not his favorite color.
No.
Gray's not my favorite color.
Jesus. He said, "I believe he was very active on the forums and was showing me pics of his S&M2 self-designed tuxedo he is wearing to the shows." I think it's Chris Urgis. Lucky bastard. Anyways, he was raving about you guys and even played me some... impromptu. I don't hate the Counting Crows.
This is a great song, man. It's 4 chords. I'd like to see old Scott Pingel do a bass version.
Scott, if you're listening to this intro, if you've lasted this long in the intro, which is normally not this long, could you do a double bass version of Mr. Jones for us?
Another thing I promise you, Scott, is I do not do drugs. So
no drugs are consumed during this episode. Just this episode. Anyways, he said he was raving about you guys, and he even played me the reggae version of Memory to explain what you guys are all about. That's
awesome.
what we're all about, are reggae covers.
That's what we're all about.
Well, after coming back to the UK, I've been listening to your shows and going back to a number of the old ones. No, I'm not going to mention anything about ice, Clint chewing ice. I don't want the abuse, he says. I love that you pull apart from a music point of view and aren't afraid to call out the bad stuff as much as the good stuff. You guys have great insights and views that already have me going back and listening to tracks I would normally skip over if I had the chance to do so. Well, you guys are the soundtrack to my commutes in and out of London, and therefore being a patron just seemed like the right thing to do. Well, thank you, Mark. Both to express my support and in some small way say thank you. If you're ever over here, I would be buying you beers on a regular basis anyways. So to me, it's just the same. Cheers, and you guys keep on doing this. You rock, Mark Waple. He says, yes, the surname sucks, but it's easy, really, like Maple, staple. Well, thanks for being a patron, of course.
Absolutely.
And man, I wish we could have met up when I was just in London a few weeks ago.
We love meeting
next
up.
time.
Yeah, if you guys want to check out our various websites, mine's clintwellsmusic.com. Is yours EthanLuck?
EthanLuck.com. I try to update my I have a touring section.
In fact, that's not even that best of a place. The best place to really keep up with us in touring is our socials.
Just really Instagram. You're probably more active on Twitter than I am, but
Yeah.
Instagram's kind of my number one.
Well, I'm going to cut housekeeping early so we
Let's
can
do
get
it.
on with our conversation with Scott. I know we're
Yeah.
anxious to speak with him and learn about S&M2, and this is before I just play all of August and everything after for you.
Exactly.
So that was the email corner, and we're going to be right back with our little friend Scott. And in the meantime, I think we were going to hear for a few words from Torben.
I think you're right.
All right. Torben? Torben, is that you?
Of course it is.
What are you doing up there? You on a flying carpet?
Yes, this is my magic flying carpet. I use it a lot to locate where my VIP seats are, and since I've already been back to see Lars, I thought it'd be a good idea to hover around and find out where Scott is hiding out so I could talk to him about his bass solo he's doing.
Well, this is crazy. I mean, I knew you'd be here at S&M2. I just thought for sure you'd be backstage somewhere. It's really crazy to see you out here with your flying carpet.
Well, like I said, I don't want to have words with Scott here soon. You know, he's a very gifted double bassist, and I think that if I could give him some wisdom, it would be a good thing.
Right. Well, are you having any luck finding him? I mean, you seem to be wasting quite a lot of time talking to me. By the way, a huge fan. I don't know if you know this, but
Thank you.
I co-host a podcast called Metal Up Your Podcast, and it's dedicated to the life's work of your son.
I've seen lots of these shirts around the arena.
Yeah, we're lucky. We have a lot of fans, yeah.
It's great to see. It's a bit of a community, I think, and I think Scott would like this.
Yeah, maybe if you find Scott, maybe you can give him some tennis lessons.
Look, there he is.
All right, Torben. Well, thanks for stopping by. It's so good to see you. Enjoy your conversation with Scott.
Goodbye.
All right, we are here with the wonderful Scott Pingel of the San Francisco Symphony. How you doing, Scott?
I'm feeling good, man. How are you doing today?
We are doing great. We're so grateful for your time. I want to start off by thanking your wife for accommodating our schedule and making it possible for you to be here with us. So thanks to her for us.
Oh yeah, she's the best.
And then I also want to say here at the top, man, just on behalf of tens of thousands of Metallica fans, not only that were at the gigs, but also just across the world, how impressed and how grateful we are for your performance in the whole gig, but specifically, of course, your tribute to Cliff Burton. What an amazing performance. Everyone loves it, dude. So congrats on that.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. That's I wanted it to be something that was meaningful for all the people that knew him and loved him. You know, that's what better thing can you do in the world than do something meaningful for someone else.
Yeah, agreed. Was this something you composed yourself? Because I noticed that there was a lot of there was parts of Anesthesia, and then there was parts that you just kind of were playing these beautiful notes, low stuff, even before you clicked on the overdrive or distortion or whatever.
Yeah,
it was almost like you made this Cliff Burton tribute sandwich, and you had your slices of bread and all the Cliff Burton meat in the middle. It was really cool. You kind of went in and out of the original tune. Was that something that you kind of had free will to do that on your own?
And I promise that'll be our last sandwich metaphor for the entire interview.
That's funny. Well, I mean, it was my concept from the beginning. I mean, Michael Tilson Thomas, the music director, came and spoke to me, and he said that they were brainstorming different ideas about ways that they could do different things on the Metallica show, and he asked if I had any particular ideas about that, and I just kind of stood there for a minute, and I said, and it came to me, and I thought, you know what, I think I do have an idea, but let me get back to you. I need to see if I can pull it off. So we were actually out on the road on tour, doing a U.S. tour at that point. And so as soon as I got back, I started listening to different versions of Cliff's solo. And because I was familiar with it, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I was a Metallica fan and still am, but I listened to them pretty relentlessly when I was, in high school and whatnot. Yeah. And so I was already well aware of Cliff. And he was an important influence in me even deciding to want to pursue the bass too, which I can get into more later. But anyway, I just had this thought of how cool would it be for me to play Anesthesia, but bow it. It would be very unexpected. But I didn't want it to be I wanted it to be mainly about Cliff, but I wanted to sort of give some of my own homage to him as well. And so, I mean, I can get into very explicit details about all of my note choices and everything I did with that solo. I mean, I don't know if now is the right time you want me to do that, or I can wait till later.
Well, yeah, let's actually go back a little bit then. So you say you were that's one of the things that people have been really curious about is, I mean, you play in the San Francisco Symphony, which is world-class musicians are in that symphony. Yeah. The symphony world, obviously, disparate from the sort of hard rock backgrounds that most of us are familiar with. So it's interesting to us to hear that, the two worlds collide, so to speak. When you started playing music, did you start with electric bass and bands in high school, or how did you get to the San Francisco Symphony?
Oh, yeah. So I started playing electric bass first when I was about 15 years old. I remember my first bass was a Yamaha BB1000S, and I had this little PV 60 watt amp, and that's what I bought. And I think I bought it used. And in part, I played other instruments before that. I played cello, I played piano, I played trumpet. But once I got my hands on that electric bass, it was like, this is what I want to do. And I just loved it. And so I was already familiar with Metallica, and but then my sister sang in this band, and one of the members of the band turned me on to Weather Report and various fusion bands. So I got familiar with Jocko. And when I heard Jocko play, that was just sealed the deal. I was like, all right, this is just incredible. And I can even point to a very specific lick that he played in the Heavy Weather album with Weather Report in the Birdland tune. When I heard it, just moved me so much that I was like, I want to make those kinds of sounds. And then he also does the harmonic stuff with his thumb. Yeah. When he's playing the melody, like it's so creative. His use of the instrument was so creative and so inventive, and the same thing goes for Cliff. His use of the instrument, but in particular his use of effects, is very sort of orchestral. I didn't think of it that way at the time, but at the time I just liked what I heard. Right. But I look back on it now from this perspective, and it's very sort of symphonic in a way, the way he would use his effects, and so that also influenced a bit with the way that I constructed this solo. And so going back, I did start on electric bass, and then when I decided, at that point I still kind of wanted to go to art school. But then once I got into electric bass, started taking it more seriously, and then I started getting gigs. In fact, playing in my sister's band, and we did covers of Tower of Power and Earth, Wind and Fire. So I was getting to know Rocco Prestia and Verdine White and these just amazing musicians in these different bands, and so I was getting into funk and fusion music and a lot of horn band stuff, which was just a joy. And
what part of the country are you from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
And those people that are familiar with that area, a town of McFarland. But if I said McFarland, no one would know where it is. It's a suburb of Madison, so I just say Madison.
I have heard of that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you've probably toured through Madison quite a bit too. So.
Oh, absolutely. There's a great right in the center of town in that little square. There's a really great restaurant there called the Old Fashioned, I believe. Is that correct, Scott?
Oh, is that the place with the famous hamburger?
Yes.
Yeah, it has like an egg on top and all that. Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, it's a protein bomb. It's so good.
I always go to Ian's Pizza when I'm in Madison.
Oh, that one I don't know.
Ian's. It started. I think it's a Milwaukee chain, but there's a couple in Madison. And it's like over the top pizza.
Scott, are you familiar with this really quaint, rare burger place in Madison called Wendy's?
Yeah, exactly.
You ever check that out?
Well, no, actually, the places that I would hit after gigs when I was, in high school and college was like sometimes we'd hit George Webb, which is like a greasy spoon, or there's this place called the Pine Cone. It was like a truck stop, like halfway between Milwaukee and Madison. I would hit that a lot. And my favorite thing to get at these greasy spoon restaurants was a ham and cheese omelet and a chocolate malt. That was like my stand. That's how I judged all these like late night greasy spoon places.
Do you have good breakfast? Do you have good dessert?
Right.
That's
exactly,
all I want. That's all I want.
What kind of gigs were these you were doing in your sister's band? Were they in clubs or what?
Sometimes they were club dates. A lot of times they were like weddings or parties. It was a band. They're still around actually. There's a band called the Wall of Sound, and I was in the genesis of that band.
Oh, cool.
They still play all these years later. And
with your sister?
Yeah. Well, no, my sister, she left the band after a couple of years, and I actually stayed in the band.
Okay.
Longer, and then after moving away to college. Then it was just I was going to school in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. It's about an hour east of Minneapolis. It was not practical for me to stay in the band with their schedule.
Right.
I just couldn't get to the other side of the state.
So you're discovering Jocko and like jazz fusion. What did that do to your rock sensibilities? Did it integrate well with that, or did it sort of pull you to a more sort of cerebral way of thinking about music? Yeah, I mean, there is some crossover in the energy between these different types of playing, but I guess you could say that when you get into jazz music in particular, because of the harmonic language, the more jazz influence you get, the more cerebral it can become. That's just a nice way of saying that rock and roll becomes dumber.
Well, not necessarily.
Right.
I mean, right. I don't actually believe that. I think that there's also a lot of, not to sound like snobby or anything, but profundity in simplicity. It doesn't have to be complicated to be meaningful. Of course, and I think that's a big mistake that is made in academia sometimes, and also in even the classical music world. There is a certain elitism, and it seems like, this is the cynical side of me speaking here, but it almost seemed like some composers were writing to be clever and to impress their composer friends, or do something radical and new and more complicated, rather than doing something that is meaningful.
Right,
I think there was a loss of a lot of audiences due to that, and I don't know, maybe that's just a phase it needed to go through. But I think it's come on the other side of that. I mean, audiences will be the ultimate deciders on that kind of thing. But
there's probably composers out there that wouldn't take on this Metallica gig, right?
Oh yeah, out of principle, maybe.
Are you saying composers, or you mean performers?
Or I guess both, or like
performers, maybe.
Yes, maybe performers. Yeah, people who maybe have that kind of like strictly classically trained background, who might be, somewhat elitist, or or maybe traditional to the genre, and not even consider like, oh, this could be used in a heavy metal band.
Yeah, that certainly could happen. I think with younger players that it's more part of their life.
Sure.
It's more mainstreamed in some ways, like we grew up with it. I think that's less likely. And also, I think even with the older players, at least in our orchestra, there was a number of players that did not want to play, and it wasn't because they turned their nose up at it. It was either they were just, their schedule didn't allow for it, or in some cases it was just going to be the volume.
I was about to make a joke. It was too loud.
It was too loud. Yeah. And that's the thing is they, we're exposed to it so much, high volumes on stage, right, with brass instruments and percussion, and over years. And as you get older too, I mean, it becomes more of a burden on your body. And,
sure.
and so I respect that. Some of them, they were just like, it was just going to be right for them. So that's fine. But I wasn't going to miss it for anything.
Oh, dude.
Well, yeah. I mean, like mentioned earlier that you grew up listening to Metallica and getting into Cliff, and that's a big reason why you play bass. So, I mean, I'd imagine it was a huge honor to be able to be a part of that.
Oh, I was so excited, and as I, there was the first S&M show 20 years ago, and I was still in school at that point. I wasn't in San Francisco Symphony yet, and I just remember thinking how amazing it must have been to get to do that show. That must have been just such a blast. And it's actually kind of funny. My brother is, to this day, still a just diehard Metallica fan, and when I first got the job in San Francisco, back in 2004, I was on the phone with him, and he's like, "So you're moving to San Francisco? So who is it that you're working with now?" And I said, "Oh, it's called the San Francisco Symphony." He's like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then he stops dead in his tracks. He's like, "Wait a minute, is that the orchestra that recorded with Metallica?" And I was like, "Yes, that's them." He's like, "Dude, that's so awesome." He just was freaking out.
Yeah.
He thought it was the coolest, even though he has no idea, he didn't realize that getting a job, I'm the principal bass of the San Francisco Symphony. That's like becoming like, getting on like the Golden State Warriors, relatively speaking. I mean, it's like, or the, the New York Yankees, that kind of thing.
I wanted to talk about that, Scott, for a second. I've had a few close friends that have played in some of the orchestras and symphonies in whatever towns I've been in. And I don't think let's talk just for a second. I don't know if the common person who's not a musician or knows this world knows that how hard it is to get those gigs, and that when you get that gig, most people stay in those gigs for life. I mean, there are even 25 musicians that played with you a couple of weekends ago that were even at the first one 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how hard it is to land one of those spots?
Yeah, sure. It's extremely competitive, because the different orchestras do their hiring practices a little bit differently, but sort of the basic way it goes is there's an opening, and basically someone either has to retire
or die
or go to or decide they want to go to another orchestra. But usually when you get to the higher budget orchestras like San Francisco or New York or Los Angeles or Chicago, usually those are sort of arrival orchestras. Like most people, a lot of people don't typically go anywhere else from those because you've kind of gotten up to the top.
Right.
At that point it becomes which place you'd rather live. But with that said, it's not like you can just very easily go to another orchestra and you have to wait for an opening. So when one of these openings happen, they open up this audition, and sometimes you'll get over 100 applicants for the position.
Wow.
For one chair, one position. And then what happens is then they start weeding through all the resumes and have to determine how many people to allow to have a live audition, because the live audition costs money. The orchestra they have to pay a committee. In some cases they have to rent the hall from whoever perhaps owns the hall. Like for instance, in San Francisco, we don't own our hall. The city owns it. So in order to use the space, they got to rent it. So there's a lot of expenses involved with holding an audition. So they can't just let, lots and lots of people come. They don't have the luxury of that kind of time. And so after they weed through the resumes, let's say they get 120, 150 resumes, they'll maybe weed that down to 50 invites. They'll send out, and then they'll make the other people say, we've declined your application, or they'll just say that you'll need to make a tape. So then they'll do what's called a tape round for people whose resumes just are kind of borderline.
Okay.
Or I should say, in this day and age, nobody makes tapes, but you have to make a recording and of specified music, and then people send in the recordings, and then we sit around and listen to all of them, and then we have to vote on whether we want to hear that person live. So those are the first layers of screening, is the resume round and then a recorded round if you don't make it through the resume round. And then if we don't like the recording, we'll just say, sorry, this is just not going to be the right fit. And so they're not invited to the live audition.
Does anyone ever advance in these rounds just by their pedigree or their name? Or
that's going to be the resume round.
Okay,
if someone has an impressive resume, yes, they're going to get through. Like if they're in a peer orchestra or one of the higher paid orchestras that are more competitive to get into, certainly they're going to get in to a live audition. And in some cases, they may be even advanced to a later round, which I can get into later. But after you go through the resume and if needed, audition recording screening, you get to the live auditions, and those are usually held over a few days. And there's the preliminary round, which is, let's say you have over the course of maybe 2 days, you'll hear, let's say 50 people play.
Wow.
And then at different orchestras do it differently, but then you have regular voting if you want to advance any people into the semifinal round. And so usually it'll go down, the semifinal round will be maybe 15 people. We'll make that cut into the semifinal round.
It's stressful just to hear about it.
I know, I'm stressed
Yeah,
right
I'm
now.
sweating.
Oh yeah, it's pretty cutthroat.
Right.
And then everybody has to come back and then play again, perhaps different repertoire, different music. And you're under intense scrutiny. In our orchestra, we do everything behind a screen, so we have no idea who's on the other side of that screen.
Oh, wow.
We just hear how they play. Yeah, so there's no nepotism or discrimination.
It was probably
kind.
Metallica on the other side of the screen from you.
You never know.
It was James Hetfield. And
That also kind of sounds like what intimate time with my wife's like. It's just everything's done behind a screen. You don't know who's over there.
Not sure.
JK, my wife doesn't listen to the show, so I'm fine.
I guess that could keep it interesting.
So you went through all this, huh? I mean, this is normal for someone who wants a job like that.
Yeah, that's right.
At this point, you're not living in San Francisco, right?
Oh no, I was living in Charleston, South Carolina.
Wow.
So I covered all my own expenses.
I was going to say,
out there.
you're covering your expenses to get out there, to stay in a hotel, whatever. So it's costing you money just to try to get through to whatever round. Wow.
Yeah. And don't even get me started on the cost of these instruments too. I mean, it's just
God,
it's you wouldn't believe it.
I do at some point, Scott, when it makes sense. I do want to talk a little bit about it because I saw on your Instagram you had a 250-year upright bass restored.
Yeah,
I mean the antiquity and the cost associated with some of these instruments too is just so. I just don't even think. I don't think people who investigate this kind of thing know. It's such a big deal.
Yeah, the numbers are mind-boggling.
Keep taking us through the audition process. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so if you make it through the semifinal round, then the final round that's usually cut down to maybe 4 or 5 people in the final round, and just on average, perhaps. And then that's usually the most intense round. You're out there for the longest amount of time, still behind a screen. In our orchestra, some orchestras they take the screen down at that point and they see everybody. But San Francisco is always everything behind a screen. And so then they're interacting with you perhaps, but you can't speak. You can never speak. They can talk to you, and then anything that you want to say to the committee, you say to the proctor. And then the proctor answers for you or makes requests on your behalf because they don't want to hear your voice.
Wow, jeez!
Again, the similarities and parallels to my marriage are just staggering.
Yeah,
this is like saying stuff to Darth Vader to tell to the Emperor. Like this is
exactly. Like these are not the droids you're looking for. Yeah.
So, did you ever try to say anything? Did you ever have to pass the slip or talk to the proctor or?
Oh yeah, like there was a request that was made and I didn't quite understand it, and I would say to the proctor, "Could you please ask them to repeat that?" or something like that. And then if you get through the final round, then they take a vote, and you have to get a certain minimum number of votes to even qualify to be potentially hired. So you've gone through all this, and you still are not done.
Even if you're number one. They're like, no, we're going to decide after, even though you're the last person standing, we're still going to decide.
Depending on the circumstance, sometimes a contract can be offered at that point.
Right.
But often, especially for when it's like in my case was a principal position, so you're a leadership role of the section, they want to try you out. So when I auditioned, there were 2 of us that got a qualifying vote, which means we met the minimum threshold to be invited to do a trial week with the orchestra. Wow. And so they then, and this is, so that was all, in my case, it was in January of 2004 when that happened. And then I didn't actually come and play with the orchestra until May. So I'm in this like holding pattern, wondering, what's going to happen. So then that following May, I went and played a week with the orchestra. And the other guy had done his week as well. And then another month went by, and then finally I got a phone call from Michael Tilson Thomas and offered me the job.
Wow.
So, but then in that, it's still not done. So then you get your first year in the orchestra is called your audition year.
Jeez.
And so,
God damn, this is brutal.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. So your first year, they have 2 meetings, one usually in December and the other one in April, where the committee then reviews your performance, and they meet with the music director and they take a vote on whether or not to allow you to have your probationary year, which is your second year. And so they vote, and then if they like what they see, then they give you a second year. And then during your probation year, then they also have 2 meetings and discussing your performance, and they also give you feedback on anything that they want you to work on.
Oh, good grief.
And then finally, usually in April of the second year, then they have the vote for tenure. And so then it's like academia, and that it's pretty difficult for you to be removed once you've gotten tenure.
So it's hard to get fired. People don't often get fired. Is that what you're saying?
Not very often.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you pretty much have to punch someone in the face to get fired.
I mean, after a Metallica show, you might want to.
It could happen.
I have two questions for you, Scott, hearing that whole process.
Yeah.
By the way, it's amazing that you went through all that.
Insane.
Number one, do you think that all of that is justified? Does that seem a little much for you, or is the job such that it requires that level of scrutiny?
Well, that's just where it is at this point.
That's just
what it is. Yeah, it is what it is. It's hard for me to say. I mean, there were a lot of pitfalls with the way things were done in the past. Like some orchestras in Europe look at this and they just find it to be kind of silly. Like I think I'm not totally familiar with how they do it, but the Berlin Philharmonic, I think they just have people show up. The whole orchestra sits there. There's no screen. Person comes out and they play a bunch of different things, and then the whole orchestra votes. And then I think they have various rounds, but it's a bit more casual.
That's kind of like auditioning in Nashville.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. And,
my second question, Scott, is:
yeah.
Are you familiar with the philosophical concept of fraud syndrome? A lot of artists have, or musicians can struggle with. Like, even when they're successful, there's always something in their heads that says, maybe you don't deserve this. Maybe there's people better than you, blah, blah. I feel like if you survive that process, you go to school, you obviously have the proclivity to get through school and trained, you're confident, you're even up for this gig, you even make it through all these rounds, and then, like you did, you get the call, you make the gig. Is there a sense of you where you're like, I don't deserve to be here? Or do you feel like, hell yeah, I went through all that, I went through all the schooling, I can do the job, I'm ready to do it? What was your feeling about it when you got the gig?
That's an excellent question. I would say it was a mix of both. There were times where I was like, yeah, I paid my dues and I got here. And then there are other times where I felt like, God, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. I don't deserve to be here, because there's so much to the job that you can only learn doing it. You could never learn everything in school.
Right.
And it's just, there's things that you can only learn, like how to, like very subtle things that it's hard to even explain, but just how to listen, how to time things, the culture of how the orchestra responds to impetus, such as the conductor's motion or phrasing and things. So it's just things that you can only be learned doing the gig. And so, and the more I did it, the more I realized how much I had to learn. But I stuck with it, and I didn't give up, and I kept doing my homework and practicing, and I still do. But now I feel, I've been in this orchestra for 15 years now, and I feel much more comfortable doing the job. And I've played most of the major repertoire at this point multiple times, and I feel like I know those pieces, and so it's just that margin of error is a lot smaller than it used to be. Not to say that I was like a wreck coming in and making mistakes all the time, because I wouldn't have gotten the job.
It sounds like that's impossible, actually, for you to have been a wreck.
I mean, it's possible.
Are you close with the other musicians? Are you guys friends?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Some of my best friends are in the orchestra. Yeah. And it's not like that in every orchestra. I've heard from other colleagues in different orchestras that, some of the orchestras are more business oriented, and people don't really hang out outside of the job and whatnot. Right. But that's the culture in this orchestra, is people are pretty close, for better or worse. So I like it that way. I really enjoy my friendship that I have with my colleagues. I love these guys.
That's awesome.
We have good time together, and sometimes it's frustrating, and sometimes just like any relationship.
Yeah,
but, that's a highly specialized art form, I guess. I mean, every art form has its own specialization, I guess. But this has just been, and it's been around for a very long time. Right. And there's repertoire, and there's
at least 100 years, I'm told.
At least.
Yeah. In some cases, quite a bit more. But it's like you have to be, for lack of a better analogy, a language expert in many different languages, different styles of composers and time periods, but it's more abstract than a language. So it's there's a lot to the job.
And in your case too, having a particular vernacular and vocabulary for Metallica to interpret the song, I'm really glad you went through that whole process, because now we understand like what it takes to get there. That's no joke.
Yeah.
It's not like someone's just pretty good at playing bass and they got a gig like that. Like it's a whole process.
At this point in history, certainly it's not that way. In times past, it was some just basic economics, supply and demand, and And, there were times when orchestras would be like, they badly needed someone and be like, yeah, can you play a scale? Can you play this simple piece? Great, you're in, It was just, it was a matter of, supply and demand. And then also as these contracts, especially major symphony orchestras have gotten better and better, it's also attracting more and more people to the profession, and which has made it more competitive because it's not like there's been more positions opening, or being created. They haven't added a lot of new orchestras. I mean, there are a lot of professional orchestras in this country, but I would say that there's more people applying for the limited positions than there were before.
Would you encourage young musicians to pursue this job?
I would say that you gotta be very tenacious. You got to do it because you love it and you really want it, and you won't be dissuaded by disappointment. Because it is a difficult path, but it's the same kind of thing. I mean, I can only imagine what it's like to try and become a professional athlete, and the amount of dedication and training and hard work that it must take.
Yeah.
So I mean, it probably has some comparability to that, but I mean, if you really love it and it speaks to you, and just like anything that you love, it's not always going to feel that way. I mean, there's going to be times when the emotion of love is not sort of at the front. The frustration is there, but that's where I think the deeper, more true love comes in. Is when it's an action first and a feeling second. And so
Sure.
First of all, let me say, beautifully worded, love it. And by the way, you're fired, Tony Robbins. Scott's my new guru, by the way, dropping some truth like that. So, Scott, you got the gig. You've been in the gig for a while. You're comfortable. You're a Metallica fan. You've got feet in both of these worlds. This gig comes up, and some of your colleagues decide they want to pass on it because the volume or their schedules. You want to do it. Your conductor, your boss is looking for some ideas. The band wants some unique ideas to involve the orchestra. And you have the idea, right? This is all started with you, right? You told us a little bit earlier.
Yeah, that was my idea. Yeah, I still have the email where I communicated it via email to Michael Tilson Thomas, ultimately, just through various channels. But when I proposed the idea, I said, "This is what I'm going to do." Because after I spent some time and was listening to different versions that Cliff did, was playing around in my upright, and just realizing, you know what, I think this is going to work. I think I can do this. And so I proposed it to them, and then they got back to me and said, "Hey, this, at least from the symphony perspective, this sounds like a really good idea. We'll run it by, all the powers that be." And then this was like, being in the twilight zone, because it's like there was not much communication. From what I could tell, it was going to happen, but it was never really for sure.
Right.
But I had to proceed as if it were, because it would be horrible if I didn't do my homework. And then, like a few weeks before, then they say, "Hey, we want you to do that." And I wouldn't have enough time to prepare. That would have been I would always regret that. So I was like, all right, I'm going to just stick my neck out on this and assume it's going to happen. I knew that I needed a different instrument. I needed an electric upright. I assumed that, I guess there's probably a way to mic an upright bass with effects and have it not feed back, but at least from my limited knowledge, I assumed I would need an electric upright because of running fuzz pedals and that kind of thing.
Because otherwise they would have had to have put a lapel mic or something on one of the holes and then run that through a pedal board. And...
I wasn't sure how that would all work. So
Did you own one of those before or no?
No, never owned one, never played one.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
And in fact, I never even owned an effects pedal before a few months ago.
Wow.
And so I started doing some research in different companies and
now Scott's in the white stripes.
Yeah,
this is their first bass player ever because he got a fuzz pedal now. That's crazy. So how did you go about researching what to get in terms of like the envelope filter or a fuzz, or where did you go for that info?
Well, I just started looking around on the internet, like what was Cliff Burton's rig and what was effects he was using. There's a lot of information about that out there. And then I, seeing that they used Morley, and then I started digging around on Morley's site, and I saw this Cliff Burton tribute fuzz wah pedal, and I was like, well, cool, I'll get that. And it sounded amazing. I loved it, actually. I did not ultimately end up using it, but it's not because of anything Morley did. It was just because of the way I don't have a lot of experience with pedals, and the way that I wrote out or constructed the solo. I just needed a real clear shot to turn the fuzz button on.
Yeah.
And they put the buttons at the bottom corner of the pedal. And it just made me a little bit nervous that I might miss it.
Just for people who may not know about pedals, what Scott's talking about, I think the Cliff Burton one is like a volume expression pedal.
Right.
With the on button
Yeah.
near it. So you're kind of worrying about that volume pedal and the little button.
Yeah, a lot of Morley pedals with whether it's a volume, a wah, whatever, the volume is the main part of the pedal, and it's like right on the right bottom corner of your foot is where the switch is.
Yeah.
So for you, it was just a utility. You needed to get something.
Well, it's utility, and also the way because I was very deliberate, obviously, where I turn on the effects. And when I wanted the wah to turn on, I wanted it to be where I hit this high note, and I wanted it to be in the sort of frequency range of the toe being up on the pedal.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Toe down or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a pedal where I could click it on with pressing my toe down rather than having to click something on and then move my foot over onto the pedal.
Yeah. Right.
That just wasn't going to work compositionally for me. But it's just the way that's designed. It wasn't going to work for what I needed at that point. But I love the sound of it. It was very, very awesome. I'm very grateful for them for sending it to me. And also the other thing that was cool about when I contacted Morley, I told him about what was going to happen and that I was going to be doing this solo tribute thing to Cliff Burton. And so then they put me in touch with Cliff's family, and that's how I got to communicate with Casey Ramirez, which is Cliff's stepsister.
Wow.
And she was just wonderful, and she then arranged for me to be able to meet Ray. And so that was a really wonderful aspect of that, is communicating with them in advance. But anyway, so I started looking around on the internet and finding out what it was that he used. And then I went to, there's a local music store here called Bananas at Large. And they have guys there that, of course, know a lot more about this stuff than I do. And so I actually got a lesson with a guy, Dan Petruzella, who is a guitar player, but he just knows a lot about effects. And we listened to a couple of different versions of Cliff's solo, and just listening to it, he's like, oh yeah, he's using this here and this and there. And so then they helped connect me with other pedals that I was going to need. And then Dan built my pedal board for me. And then I took a lesson with him on how to use it, because I was like, I don't know how to, what do you do? Like, what does this button do?
Wow.
I like the humility of a musician who went through the process you have to go to get a seat on a San Francisco Symphony, taking lessons from people. Were you?
You got to learn.
Were you surprised, Scott, to hear in the various live versions that basically Anesthesia that made Kill 'Em All is kind of an improv? It was an improv piece, and if you listen to him playing it live, it's kind of different every night, except for a few select motifs.
Well, that's a testament to his musicianship, and that he was doing different things. Because, I mean, I have a pretty extensive jazz background, and I very much appreciate that. But you listen to a lot of the great improvisers, and sometimes things are radically different, but you can never fully remove yourself from the equation. And so there's always going to be certain things that there are some kind of continuity that you can kind of identify. But in this case, I mean, Cliff had to keep some things the same so people knew what the heck it was he was doing. It could be totally radically different, and people wouldn't recognize it as Anesthesia. So there were certain aspects of the form that he had to maintain, but he was very creative, the different versions he did. So I had to sort of pick and choose through the different ones that were going to work best for this instrument, and using the bow and just the way the instrument's laid out.
How did you make that selection process? Is there anything?
Well, one of the first things was the key, because in some of the versions he starts out in D minor and works his way into E minor. And there's other recordings where maybe he's using an instrument that's tuned down and it sounds like it's in E flat minor, which would have been, I wouldn't be practical on the instrument unless I just tune the whole instrument down. It's really not necessary. It's more the notes that you're playing probably is more important than the actual key that it's in.
Sure.
But there was one version where he did the whole thing. It sounded like, unless it was the recording was sped up or something, but it sounded like everything was in E minor. And when I heard that, I was like, all right, now I have permission to do all of it in E minor. so whether it was accurate or not, but
you're just waiting for that.
I was waiting for that because you need those open strings. You know,
I was just going to say, like for people who may not know music, for it being an E minor rather than a flat key, you have all these other options available to you, even on an upright bass, right? That make things easier and sound better too to have these open string options.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
that's right. It's a much more resonant.
Right.
In fact, in classical music, composers sometimes, like Mahler did this in his Ninth Symphony. He intentionally wrote the last movement in D flat when it's a D major symphony, but the last movement is in D flat.
Wow!
And what that did is it darkened the sound of the strings because they don't resonate as well.
Wow!
And so that was a very intentional, compositional, and also philosophical too, because it was also representing sort of death, and so it was a descension rather than ascension. So it's descending down into D flat rather than somewhere up.
Very metal.
Are you? It kind of is metal.
Very metal.
That's very Celtic Frost.
Yeah.
Are you the kind of musician, Scott, where when you hear these different versions of Cliff playing, you can hear with your ear that it's maybe half a step down or half a step up?
Oh, do I have perfect pitch? I would say I have a very good relative pitch. You know, I can generally, because we tune to an A pitch every day, and so I can usually pick that out, although don't ask me to sing it for you right now because I'll totally blow it if I try to sing it.
And now Scott Pingel to sing
A440.
Hey Scott, what is your perfect. You know what? I do have perfect pitch, and that was great.
Was it really?
I absolutely don't know.
That was D flat.
Okay.
That was D flat minor, which is the half step saddest of all keys.
Yeah.
Just a brief detour. What is a normal? You said you tune to that every day. What's a normal day for you guys?
So in the symphony rehearsal regiment, it depends on the week, but we normally do 4 rehearsals and 4 concerts a week.
Wow. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's usually the same. It depends on the time of the season, but it's usually the same program for that whole week. And then the next week is a totally different program, 4 rehearsals and 4 concerts.
So do you get a piece of music that you know you guys are going to do and you know you have a rehearsal? Do you do homework at home or do you just wait for the rehearsal?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have to. Well, it depends on the piece. I mean, if it's something that's relatively simple, and I've played it a number of times, you know, it's probably not necessary for me to spend much time practicing it. But yeah, I mean, there's some things in the repertoire. It's just mechanically so complicated that, I mean, you have to spend time training your fingers how and when to move. So,
right. Yeah.
You know, in your bow and everything, and so you have to whip it in shape.
How far in advance did you know that this S&M2 gig was going to happen?
So I found out not that long before the public did. I mean, because they figured if they told us, you know, chances are it could leak. So it was pretty much simultaneous to the announcement.
We found out in March. Was it March?
Yeah, that's right. It was March.
Yeah.
Wow, man, they really put a lid on that.
Yeah,
they really did.
Yeah. Well, they were very tight. I mean, I can get into that even with the rehearsals with the security, and they wouldn't let people take pictures.
I definitely want to hear about the rehearsals. So you find out in March that the gig's coming, and you know, maybe your boss told you, "Hey, this is what we're doing," and it interests me to hear that people were able to even bow out of it. So when a particular gig comes up, or you're going to do a series or something, it's possible for people to say, "Oh, I can't do it."
Well, in the orchestra, you can either, like if there's a week that either you don't want to play or you have some other conflict, you can take the week off.
Okay.
But that's a little bit different than the Metallica show. The Metallica was an extra set of services on top of our normal services. So actually it was a very, very busy week because we had all of that extra stuff on top of our normal schedule.
Wow.
Okay.
So that was, like I said, you know, some people, it was just going to work for their either their schedule, or I should even add their, you know, just physical ability to sit behind the instrument. You know, it can be depending on people's age and their condition, and if they've been nursing injuries or whatever. You know, you have to be careful. So there's a whole number of reasons why they might not wanted to play. So it was a very grueling week, but inspiring.
On that note, speaking of someone's age, maybe they've been in the symphony for a long time. What's an average length show that you would normally do during the week?
The concerts are typically around, I would say, a little over 2 hours, including the intermission. So, yeah.
Not much different than the Metallica show, I guess.
That's right.
I'm curious what the split was, in your opinion, Scott, on people who were familiar with the band and excited about the project versus people who were either familiar with the band and not excited about it, or just didn't really know what it was and were generally neutral or bummed about it. You know what I mean?
Well, I can't honestly say that there was anybody I talked to that was bummed and were like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that." I honestly, there is not a single person I can think of that had that reaction. I would say everybody I talked to was so excited about it.
I mean, when you found out the news, we all love S&M1. Never thought we'd get a second one, and all of a sudden you find out, oh, we're going to do this. I mean, were you just beside yourself at that point?
Oh yeah, I was like, man, I missed the first one. Now we're going to do this one. And then when it sold out so fast and so many fans were upset, and then we were still out on the road when all that happened. And then so I'm around the management and the conductors and all that, and I'm hearing them talking, and I overheard them talking about adding a second show. And I was like, what? And so then I went over and asked, and they said, well, yeah, because there's just so much demand, and people, Metallica was really upset that it's just the way it worked out, and they really wanted their fans to be happy. And so they decided to add this second show. And of course, we were all thrilled about it.
Wow.
Definitely want to talk about that too, because the second show, as you probably know, Scott, was pretty much the fifth member fan club only.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm interested to hear.
They did that intentionally.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that to help keep the bots out from pushing out the diehard fans that maybe don't have $10,000 to drop on tickets.
So you find out in March, and what is it like for you? So you're a fan anyway, and obviously an astute cat musically, but what's it like for you guys when a gig like that comes down the pike? Are you given sheet music from the first one? Who's coming up with the compositions for the additional songs? What does all the behind the scenes of getting a show like this off the ground look like?
Well, I can only scratch at the surface of what I can only imagine what the behind the scenes stuff is, because it's so complicated, everything from logistics to lawyers. But as far as our part, we didn't actually see, well, since I'm the principal, I saw the music a few days earlier just because I had to put bowings in all the new stuff. So what I mean by bowings is, so we don't look, it doesn't look ridiculous. It looks sort of uniform, but also has a uniformity in sound. I make determinations of what direction our bows are going.
Oh, wow.
So I have to write that in all the parts in my section, and or I write it in my part, and the librarians transfer it. And so I did that for the new stuff, but I didn't even get to see the old stuff. In fact, some of the stuff was so hot off the presses, I didn't even get a chance to do that.
Oh, wow.
So most of the music we didn't get until the first rehearsal.
Really?
And so we're sight reading it.
When was that?
At the first rehearsal, and that was it was just over a week before. No, it was the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. So it was a week before the first show.
Whoa, that was the first rehearsal.
Yeah, that was without the band. I had this is kind of a cool story. I had my own rehearsal a couple days before that. And so I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll jump back a little bit. I had proposed the idea to them, and they said preliminarily it sounds good, but we'll get back to you. And then time goes by, I don't hear anything, and as I mentioned before, I'm proceeding as if it's going to happen. But
so you're putting the pedal board together, you're getting the bass together.
Yep. Oh yeah, I spent thousands of dollars on equipment.
Whoa.
At that point, with no guarantee it was even going to happen. So.
And was it a thing where you keep talking about that you came up with the idea? Was it even presented to you like, we want to pay tribute to Cliff, or was this something on your own that you suggested?
Oh, I suggested it.
Okay, so this wasn't initially part of the plan of the show.
Oh no, not at all. No, I was the one that suggested.
I think the vibe was,
wow,
everyone was brainstorming about a way to do something, and I guess what sounds kind of cool about that, Scott, is that they treated everyone with respect and said, "Hey, every idea is available, right?
Yeah.
Like anyone has an idea." Is that the case?
Yeah.
Did anyone have any ideas that didn't get used?
Yeah, there was. So I don't know how many people they spoke to ask for ideas. It wasn't like the whole orchestra got together and it was that. It was like the music director approached me, so he may have just selected certain people to talk to. So I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that there was another one that was slated to be on it, and then he ultimately decided not to do it, as one of the percussionists was going to do something.
Yeah.
And he just decided that he didn't think that it wasn't that Metallica or anybody caught him. It was that he just decided that he didn't think it was going to.
Do you know what it was?
Right. It was. I don't know exactly. He said it was some mallet thing. I don't even remember what the mallet, meaning like vibraphone or marimba or some percussion instrument.
Timpanis.
No, it would have been one of the sort of
more Or melodic.
dummy.
Yeah, melodic. Yeah,
A xylophone.
I thought a timpani tribute to Metallica would have been so good. Timpani tribute to Cliff.
That could have worked. Yeah. No, I think it was some sort of mallet feature, either vibraphone or marimba. I think he said it. No, I take it back. He said it was a marimba intro to something, and he just decided after toying around with it that it just wasn't going to work.
If you had known that the part of the process of you being approved to do it meant you going to HQ and playing it in front of the band and like 20 of their management and their inner team, would that have discouraged you from proceeding?
Oh no, I assumed that would. I mean, that would happen.
Right.
If I was in their shoes, I would want to hear it before it, gets put on the program.
Right. Yeah.
They have a certain standard they have to maintain, and a certain sort of product image, as it were, and voice to their group. And so I wouldn't want. I would never expect that they would just put it on. I would do the same thing if I was them.
You're putting it all together. You're proceeding as if it's going to happen because you have to, and you sound like a very fastidious, prepared person. And then you finally do get the call, hey, it is happening. They want to hear it. And it's almost like another audition, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So it was like, I think it was like mid-July when the conductor, Edwin Outwater, texted me. He said, yeah, I just spoke with the band. They love the idea, but they want to hear it. Make sure you're around last week of August. And I had this actually. So you mentioned that the instrument that was being restored that you saw on Instagram. I was supposed to go pick up that instrument last week of August, but then I moved the trip into September because I didn't know when exactly they were going to want me to be there, and I wasn't going to be like, sorry, I can't make it because I'm on the East Coast. I wanted to make sure I was available. So I kind of cleared my schedule for that week leading up, or those few days leading up to the first rehearsal. And so then that week, I think it was like the day before. He said, yeah, all right, they want you at HQ tomorrow at 3:00. Can you make that?
Wow.
And I said, yes, I can do that. So then, and I live pretty close to where their headquarters is. I live in a little town called Mill Valley, which is a few exits away from San Rafael, where their HQ is. And so I drove up there and walked in, and they were expecting me, and so they led me back into the
sort of the main tracking room.
Yeah, the tracking room. Thank you. And
you're welcome, Scott. I'm here for you, Scott.
The room where Rob Trujillo got the job.
What was the vibe, by the way? Like you walking in. I mean, there's always that kind of awkward beginning. Did it feel welcoming? Did it feel okay?
Yeah. So I've met Lars before. Because he lives here and he comes to concerts occasionally, and I've chatted with him, and we even talked about at one point there was a possibility I might even give a couple bass lessons to his son. And
oh, cool,
awesome.
So I had some interactions with Lars. So he was very welcoming when he said, he's like, "Hey man," he recognized me immediately, and then introduced me to Rob and to Kirk. And it's funny, Kirk was sitting there on the couch practicing away, and he kind of looked up at me and he's like, "So who are you? What do you do?" that was before Lars had introduced me to him, but it was so funny. It's like, who's this guy walking in here?
He's like, you're like, I'm gonna blow your mind in about 5 minutes.
No.
Well, Scott, were you walking in like with your gear and shit? Like, were you?
Well, we had loaded it into their sort of dining area, and it was just kind of sitting there. But then I walked in just with my bows slung around my shoulder, and
much like Antonio Banderas in Desperado, I imagine.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm glad they didn't think it was some sort of offensive weapon or something. But
was like Zach there, Rob's tech, to sort of set it all up? And
yep, and Chad, they were both. But they were actually over in the rehearsal room at that point. I didn't meet them yet. But so I walked in, and he introduced me, and he said they were right in the middle of something, and he said, we'll get to your thing. Maybe can you stick around for another 30 minutes?
They were playing Uno, I believe.
Yes.
It's probably
actually
Tetris.
Game. I think it was.
Oh,
Tetris.
Right on. They were gathered around a Game Boy.
Yeah.
Yes. And they. So I said, sure. I wasn't going to be like, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave. No, obviously not. I just said, sure. And I was just happy to just sit there and watch them work. And as they planned how to get in and out of different songs on the set list, and it was just and really fun listening to them discuss this and watch how they work and realize what an incredible operation this whole thing is and how many people are involved. That's when it really started to hit me, the scale of this whole thing. And then they said, all right, well, can you go get your stuff set up? So they brought me into the rehearsal room, and that's where I met some of the guitar tech guys. Were all super nice. And they put me right about where James normally stands when they rehearse. And then like all these people, I didn't even know who a lot of them were, just started to line up around me. And once I was all plugged in and ready to go, that's when Lars said, all right, let's hear it. No pressure.
Jeez.
With a toothpick hanging out of his mouth. And
after your long ass audition process for the San Francisco Symphony, this was probably like, I mean, not easy, but just like,
yeah, you've been in high pressure situations
less pressure
before.
Yeah.
And I've been in plenty of high pressure situations before. And it's interesting. I actually didn't feel that nervous. And they even had cameras going too. Like they always have cameras going for their, archival footage and behind the scenes things and whatnot. And so all that is on film, the whole interaction.
Hello, my babies. Clint Wells here. At this point in our phone conversation with Scott, we had some technical difficulties with the quality of the phone call. Entirely on our end, I blame the concrete construction of HQ1. We got it together. We got on Wi-Fi, and from here on out, it's smooth sailing as far as quality goes. Just wanted to give you a quick update, and now back to our wonderful conversation with Scott Pingel.
So I left out an important part. So originally, after I had proposed the idea, then they had some ideas of their own, and they thought that perhaps Rob and I could like trade off, that we would both play and interact and trade riffs and stuff. But then after hearing me play it, Rob was like, "I think we should just let this ride." He's like, I don't think I need to be involved with this. He says, I think this is great the way it is. So it was very magnanimous of him. He's just an angel. I just love him. He's a fantastic guy.
At any point, I'd imagine you were like, God, what a cool thing would have been to compose something together.
Yeah. No, of course that thought crossed my mind. And, but then there was another component of it too. That was a little bit nervous because it's like, well, what if I can't keep up with him and don't do him justice or something? So, there was a little bit of that too, but,
I'm sure because Rob is a deep cat musically, and I'm sure I'm sure you guys have talked about both of your mutual love for Jaco Pastorius, who Rob, produced a documentary about.
Oh yeah. We almost closed a bar together a few nights after that.
There you go.
Talking about Jaco.
And awesome. You don't know much about our history, Scott, but, we are huge Rob Trujillo fans over here.
Awesome.
Especially what he's had to come into in that band. And we love Jason Newsted. And of course, Cliff left such a huge mark on the band, but we're such big fans of Rob.
Absolutely.
He absolutely made the right call because I've seen this performance, Scott, and it truly is breathtaking, not to kiss your butt anymore.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Rob saw it and thought the way this has to go down, the best way to pay tribute to Cliff, because I don't know if you've seen the footage or if you've seen any of the shows the last couple of years of touring, Scott, but Rob does an awesome Anesthesia tribute during the gigs, and it's cool. It's pretty faithful, and you can see effects right, and they play this great like video montage of Cliff from Live on the Green in '85.
Yeah, I saw one of those.
So for Rob to be able to say like, dude, this should be its own thing here, I think is really cool of him, man.
Yeah.
Very cool,
Did he just say it into the open room like that, or was that kind of a conversation later?
No, he said it to the whole room, with the producer and everybody talking there. Because Greg Fiddleman was saying, so could we open this section up, and like how could this work with the two of you? And like we talked about maybe having you guys exchange, back and forth. And Rob was like, you know what? I don't think we need to do that, and I don't think we should do that.
Did anything change from what you composed and wrote in your home studio to what you played for them to what got played on S&M2?
Only a little bit. More, it's probably aspects of timing and a few little like minor aspects to some of the licks and things. But a lot of what I wrote, especially in that whole intro leading up into his solo, was very intentional.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is the right time to get into that. But so what I wrote at the beginning, when you listen to Cliff play Anesthesia, there's in almost every version he plays this lick that really signals to Lars at the end of the solo's coming. And it says da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da, and then they go out. And I I was like, where does that lick come from? What does that thing mean? And I would just kept thinking about it. And because I wanted to try and to do some sort of intro into getting into the solo to sort of, so that the audience didn't really know what was coming. And when I was trying to come up with material initially, actually, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I kept hearing Bach, and I mentioned that to Kirk, and he's like, man, Cliff was so into Bach. And I was like, I knew it. Just from listening to his playing, I just kept hearing Bach as I was trying to conceive of some sort of an intro. So I wrote these more contrapuntal kind of Bachian things. But then I was listening to it again, and I was thinking about that lick that he played at the end of the solo almost every time. And I started toying around with that. And if you listen to what I play, it's actually, I play it very slowly. When I start out with this low fifths, like, and then these little half steps in the upper voice, and it's like it's kind of reaching towards something, and it's meant to be kind of ethereal, something emerging, and then it kind of bursts up, and then you hear I play almost exactly that lick that he plays, but I play it very slowly.
Yeah,
and but I play in a very somber, sort of lamenting way. It's sort of it's mournful. And then I expand on sort of one of the motives inside the lick, and then it winds itself down into just a solitary note that then goes into that arpeggio figure that he did often as an intro to Anesthesia. And then at that point in the solo, what I kind of envisioned was like Cliff he's kind of started to emerge back, and he's trying to call to his buddies like, hey guys, you remember, and his fans, like, remember when I used to play this lick? And that's why I did that without fuzz. I did that with the harmonizer.
Because you wanted to be clear?
I wanted it to be clear, but I also wanted it to have a sort of almost unreal quality to it, this ethereal quality, and like it wasn't fully in focus yet. And so that's what that moment was just sort of him like calling him out, and then I get a little faster, and to me, like what I felt in that moment is him just like, really, I miss you guys, and this is what I'm doing, and all right, this is what I miss doing, and then I wrote this series of chords and stuff that were intended to be kind of an expression of frustration.
Yeah,
and I play these chords that kind of work my way down in the lower part of the instrument. And then I settle on this C third between C and E, which has a direct relationship can be very easily transferred into A minor. And Cliff was doing that in his solos. He would play with like the 1 chord and the 4 chords, which would be an E minor, it would be the E minor chord and the A minor chord. And so at that moment, that's when I drop into A minor, and then I click on the fuzz at that moment. And that, to me, that's sort of where Cliff sort of bursts through.
I see in that moment in the performance, Scott, which, by the way, we're kind of like, Ethan and I are like sharing choked up looks here across from each other.
This is
wow.
Yeah, what you've put into this emotionally is amazing.
What I'm hearing from you that I think is so interesting that I'd like for you to speak to, if you can, is a criticism of orchestral music can tend to be that it lacks emotion, or I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but if people have written this music and then it's perfunctory and people play it and you read it off a sheet of paper. But I've seen this performance of yours, and when you go into that section, you kind of have your head back in sort of a euphoric state. And even if you didn't do that expressively in the performance, everything you're describing about the note choices, things reaching for something, reminding the band, hey, I miss you guys, I miss my fans. It puts quite a wrench in the argument that it's emotionless, because it's quite a bit of an emotional ride you're taking us on, just describing how you put this piece together.
Oh yeah, I mean, in fact, when I was working on it at one point, when I was working on that moment, I actually teared up when I was playing it, and at my house, and then because I was also trying to figure out exactly when I was going to turn the effects on, and when I came up with that idea of getting to the bottom, and then when I hit that A-E sort of power chord, and I realized that's when I have to turn the fuzz on, and when I heard it, set my instrument down and I like ran down the hall, and my family are in the living room, and I'm like, I figured it out. This is when I'm going to turn it on. This is going to be, this is going to be just the right spot. Because I felt like I found the truth of what I was looking for, in that moment.
And they're like, Dad, we're watching The Simpsons. You're such a nerd.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, we're so happy for you. Good job, Daddy. So,
how long did it take you to compose that?
Parts of it came very fast. Other parts of it, I had to wrestle with things to try and find exactly what I thought was going to be right and what I was looking for.
Were you recording it and then sort of listening back, or was this all done in your mind? Or
it was mostly done in my mind. There was one time I was like, all right, I'm thinking too much. I'm going to just turn on the recorder and I'm going to just improvise. Yeah. And that's actually where the very first bit where I play, when I'm starting to play with those chords and things, with this sort of emerging thing, that's actually where that came out of, is I just improvised that. And then I listened back to it and I was like, okay, I like this. Then I refined it a little bit. I changed a couple minor little things, but mainly it's as it just kind of just came out of me. And so, but then I had to try and figure out, when am I going to turn the wah on? Mm-hmm. And originally I was just going to turn the wah on when I went into playing more the literal version of Anesthesia, where it goes the da dee da dee da dee da. Wow, I was going to turn it on right where that was, but
could have also always asked Kirk Hammett when to turn a wah pedal on, because
I could have.
He might know.
Then when I was toying with it, and then I decided to put this sort of fast run to get me from the bottom part into that, because I felt like it needed motion and it needed energy and it needed sort of kind of this expression of kind of wailing. And then when I went up to that top high note, I was like, all right, and that was another moment of great happiness, because I was like, this is the exact spot that the wah has to be turned on, and it has to be turned on in a certain way. It has to be turned on when the wah is up in a higher frequency range, because in the sweep of the wah, because I wanted that sound of that wailing and that brightness in the sound, and that's when it clicks on, and which is all nerve-wracking because I'm not that familiar with how to use these things. In fact, I have to confess, and Alan, who's the owner of Bananas at Large, would confirm this. I said to him, I was like, so how the hell do you turn this thing on? Because how are you supposed to get to that switch when it's like under the pedal? And he looked at me like I was a complete idiot. He's like, you have to push your toe down on it.
Lean forward, yeah.
Yes, and I was like, you got to be kidding me! I can't believe how foolish I feel right now. I was like, of course that's what you do, but I'd never used one before, so I was like, thought there was something I was missing. It's embarrassed to say, but anyway,
you're fired from the San Francisco Symphony. But
exactly.
By the way, Scott, I'm here to tell you, you've been let go.
It's over.
You didn't know where to push the button on the thing.
Yes, I know it's really embarrassing. I probably shouldn't be divulging that, but no, I don't care. But it's just funny.
So the audition at HQ, or I call it an audition, but you played it for the band. You get the seal of approval, of course, from Kirk saying Cliff would have loved it. Rob Trujillo saying it should just be you. I mean, they must have felt great and reaffirming about what you composed. But also, when did you get to play it for James? And did that sort of feel like another gauntlet? Was that a different deal?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So James didn't get to hear it until we had. So that was on Thursday, and then we had a full orchestra without the band on the following Saturday. And then that night we went down to this place called the Cow Palace, which is another large like arena. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because the Chase Center was not available, so they had to set the whole stage up with all of the Jumbotron and everything, and some of the lighting. That was all. They had to preset it down there so that we could, everybody could do their practice. So, for not just the musicians, but also, the lighting engineers and all, everybody, and the sound engineers. There was a lot that had to be done because we didn't get into the Chase Center until a few hours before the first performance. So anyway, but going back, so that Saturday night I didn't get to play the solo, and then we had that Sunday off, and then Labor Day we had 2 rehearsals. And the first rehearsal we didn't get to it, and then the second rehearsal, the night rehearsal, we did. And so for those rehearsals, James was there for those, and so that's when he heard it for the first time. And he came over and he was really happy with it, and thanked me.
Wow.
And that was really, really nice. And he's kind of the quiet, wise man in some ways of the band. He's more reclusive from what I can tell. And he's very nice, very, very nice man. But he seems like he's they all have their own personalities, but
their own energy,
for sure.
Yeah, definitely, and all just wonderful people. And but it was also, James is such a presence. If you've ever been around him, he's very tall and big, and just like he walks in, and it's just like you can't miss him.
Right, yeah.
And so he commands a certain presence, and so it was also everybody was very meaningful and very important to me, and he was sort of the last piece of the puzzle at that point.
Man, that's so cool.
What did your colleagues think about the piece when they were hearing it in the rehearsals?
Oh, well, that was another thing that James said to me. So they hadn't heard it until the same time James did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
Because so at this point, the only people who'd heard it were your wife and your daughters, and then the HQ and company.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But they knew you were doing it, though, right?
A lot of people didn't know it until like the day of, because Edwin
said you guys were friends.
Yeah. Well, I kept it quiet in part because I didn't know it was going to happen.
Right.
I wasn't totally sure, and then also, the band. Later, I found out they were very happy I kept it quiet because they wanted it to be a surprise to the fans. Mm-hmm. And so my instinct was just not to say anything for whatever reason. And I didn't even think about it that much. I decided to just keep it to myself.
I mean, that was a good call, man. I mean, as far as all of us fans knew, when the band made the announcement about the shows, it was like, we're going to do Michael Kamen's arrangements and stuff that came out after that.
Yeah, some new stuff.
Right, some new stuff. So as far as we knew, nothing, before Reload was happening.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I was on vacation in Europe, and I look at the set list, and all of a sudden I see Anesthesia, and I'm like, what the hell's this? And it wasn't Rob Trujillo, and I was like, what is this?
Dude, Scott, your moment with Anesthesia is probably the biggest takeaway of S&M2.
Hands down.
Because otherwise it would just be that they played Day That Never Comes and All Within My Hands.
Right.
And James did Unforgiven 3, and he just sang it to an orchestral accompaniment.
Hardwired stuff.
And a couple of hardwired tunes. But this is probably the moment of S&M2.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And you're going to be all over the DVD and the album. I mean, there's so many other things to talk about. Okay, so James hears it. James likes it. I'm sorry, I don't want to take too much of Scott's time.
Oh, that's okay.
So that's on Labor Day. That's on Labor Day. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's on Labor Day. Yep.
All right. So what happens after Labor Day?
So then we don't see each other. So then the symphony has to go back to our regular regimen of rehearsals and concerts, and then so we don't see Metallica again until what time was rehearsal? It was like 4 hours before the first.
When were you guys rehearsing the Metallica material? Not just your piece, but all of it, all of the arrangements.
So that was that Saturday morning rehearsal before Labor Day. That was full orchestra without the band. And then that night we went down to the Cow Palace, and then that was when we ran through things with the band. And then we had those 2 rehearsals on Labor Day, all with the band.
And were there moments where you're stopping and saying, this isn't working, let's change this?
Oh, yeah.
So
totally.
A lot of rewriting and reconfiguring how to make it better.
A little bit of that. Mainly it was transition stuff. I mean, on the inner mechanics of the tunes, everything was great because a lot of it had been done before. And Bruce Coughlin, who did the arrangements for the new stuff, is a very competent and experienced. He's excellent. One of the leading arrangers. So all of his charts worked great, and so there wasn't a lot of issues with that. It was getting sound levels, getting used to how to hear each other, work the soundboards, because each section had its own monitoring system, which is a whole nother thing, and just getting used to that environment, which is so different from what we normally are playing in. And and just how to get in and out of the different songs and how many counts are going to be, and so a lot of that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the monitoring? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah,
were you guys on in-ears? Did you have wedges? Were you?
Yeah, so that was very complicated. No, there were no wedges. Everything was most of the orchestra, they were all using over ears, and then I bought a set of in-ears for the show.
Did you get your ears molded?
I bought Ultimate Ears, and they do the laser scan. Yeah, so I did the 3D thing, and I'm so glad they sound incredible. And I decided just to get the same ones that the band used. They use the UE7s, but I did test drive the UE Lives, and those are just like, it's just like the greatest thing I've ever heard. I couldn't believe it.
And for people who don't understand this, what happens is, in Scott's case, for Ultimate Ears, they take a laser where they mold your ear. I use West Tone where they actually put like foam and shit. It's horrible.
Yeah,
and then you get in-ear monitors that have the UE7s. I'm guessing have 7 drivers in them.
No, I think it's 3.
3 drivers.
It's just a product number. Yeah.
So they perfectly match your ear. They seal your ear, so you're able to get more clarity at lower volumes. And it's the way most professional people make live music. Are you saying you were one of the only people that got molded in-ears?
For the show, yes. And then I told Edwin, the conductor, that I got them, and he was like, "That's so awesome. I think maybe I should do it too." So then he went and got a pair of the same.
Wow.
And so yeah, we both did it. But we both had sort of prominent roles in the show. So it just seemed to be more fitting than to have chunky like over-ear headphones on.
What are over-ear headphones?
Cans.
Well, just cans.
Oh,
yeah.
cans. Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
What me and Clinton are wearing right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I just thought it would be.
That's like a term from the 30s.
Yeah.
Over
right.
in-ears.
Well, we reckon
Yes.
we'll use them over ears.
Exactly.
So each section had their own mix, or how did that work?
Yeah. And another component of the in-ears that's so important is they're sound isolating. So they reduce the volume that you hear in general. And so that's one of the big reasons I got them, was to isolate the incredibly high volumes that are in the room.
Right.
And so the ones that I got, they have a filter in it that you can pull out. So, but they normally they reduce sound by 26 decibels, or if you pop this little thing out, it's only reducing by 12 decibels, but it just reduces the impact.
It's the I think they're called the ambient ones or whatever.
Ambient filter. Yeah. That's what it is. And so that was very, very helpful, because it allowed me to be in that environment without high volume.
Right.
So anyway, but the monitoring system, they had a different set of monitors for each section, because we had a mixer for each section, because you're going to want to hear different things depending on what section of the orchestra you play in. So as the bass players, we wanted to hear a lot of ourselves, naturally, a little bit of the orchestra, a fair amount of the band, but a lot of Lars's snare drum and hi-hat and kick drum.
Okay.
Yeah, you're trying to lock in with the backbeat and the kick. And
Exactly. And because we did not have a click. There was no click track.
No click on the whole gig, or there just wasn't a click for you?
Not for us. I think Lars had one.
But the gig was on a click?
They normally don't use a click.
No.
But for this, they might, though.
But sometimes they did just to get things started.
Okay.
But and then also because we recorded it so that the tempos were consistent, I think Lars may have been on a click, maybe not all of it, but a fair amount of it, just to make sure that, but I can't answer that. Maybe it wasn't the whole show, but I know some aspects of it he was on a click, because we did a patch session on that before the Sunday show for the audio, because they needed to get a clean orchestra track, because our instruments are acoustic and we have microphones in front of our instruments.
Right.
And so we're getting a lot of bleed from the PA system, and the band and the crowd noise is all going in through those mics.
So you're saying, Scott, that for Greg Fiddleman's purposes, you guys got a full performance of just the orchestra for mixing.
Yep.
You could basically, what Scott is saying, if they need to, and probably predominantly, actually, they're going to be mixing in the clean, non 20,000 screaming Metallica fans and non 4 guys banging on instruments, so that they can. So that's smart. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, that's very smart.
Yeah, they had to. Yeah, because there's 18,000 fans screaming in there. It was for each show, and
especially at night too.
Too much. Yeah.
So how many times did you guys run through that? Because basically that had to have been billed as, this is what the producer's probably going to use for the clean audio. Was that just like one time through, or multiple times through songs, so they had comp options, or what?
Yeah. So we had we had a click, and then we had a band track.
Where did that come from?
From, I think they recorded our performances. So we had a band track going, and then just as a reference, and then we just played along with it.
Or from a previous rehearsal?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
That
I think
is
that's
fascinating. So probably from the Cow Palace.
Yeah,
maybe it may or maybe not. I don't know the answer where they got the band track from, but
S&M1.
Whoa.
Well, it could be. Actually, it could be, because some of the charts were the same, so it could be. But yeah, that was the only way to be able to get an isolated orchestra sound. And then even for me, when I did my solo, I sent them both a clean and a wet signal.
Yep.
Because also Big Mick was going to need both for the clarity in the room. Because once you put fuzz, I've learned so much about effects.
Yep.
Even though I know I'm only scratching the surface, but I've learned so much in the last few weeks.
You dove straight in the deep end of
You
effects.
did. No, the wet dry is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what I learned is that bass with fuzz in particular gets muddy really fast. So that's what Big Mick requested, is that I give them both clean and dry, so that in the room he could mix them.
Did you interface with Big Mick at all? Or?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. So actually, getting back my pedal board, the way it was designed, the way Dan at Bananas at Large and I worked it out. In the end, it didn't quite work through the PA system, and so Big Mick made a suggestion. He's like, hey, take your compressor pedal. I use the MXR compressor pedal and put it at the front of your chain. Yeah. And he says, and I think that will give you a cleaner, more active signal going through the rest of the pedals. So that's what I did. And that made a huge difference, because we had a problem with my fuzz pedal was clipping, because the bass sent a very hot signal into the pedals, first of all. But then the other thing was with the bow and the amplitude and the strings and how much energy was going through the signal. It was too much for the fuzz pedal.
Right.
And when I would hit that low chord that was so important, it was kind of clipping out. Mm-hmm. And then once we put the compressor on that just completely eliminated it. And because the fuzz pedal is made by Ryra, which is not so well known, but it stands for, I guess, Rock Your Reconditioned Amp. And this thing it's just so fat and thick and dirty and awesome. I just love this pedal.
What's going to happen with the pedal board now? Are you going to start an experimental rock project,
or
what?
Are you going to take it to the next rehearsal for the symphony?
Maybe. Yeah. No, I'll definitely keep toying with it. I mean, I bought numerous fuzz pedals to try and find the right sound and whatnot. And I have another one that I'll be able to use if I don't have the luxury of sending both a wet and dry. I have another one that will allow me to control that. It's by Aguilar, and they have which I really like the sound of.
Aguilar's dope.
They make great stuff.
Yeah. Another one someone recommended was Dark Glass. I don't know if you guys have much familiarity with that company in Finland.
Glass, yeah.
But I didn't get a chance. I mean, when we were experiencing that clipping, and Big Mick, he put my mind at ease, and he tuned my pedal board and whatnot. And then later in an email, he said, let's try your compressor at the front. And we spent time on the phone. This is the day, actually the morning of, the day before the Friday performance. So Thursday, I'm on the phone with Mick, and he's like, all right, well now, so I had to completely undo my pedal board and redo it, because I had to move everything around, and which I guess maybe I didn't have to do it that way. I could have just used different cables and just rerouted, but I wanted everything to be in sort of its order.
For many musicians like you, Scott, and Ethan and I, a lot of fastidious pedal nerds, there's almost a ritual to getting it laid out correctly. You want your signal chain to follow it. It's almost like an OCD thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And
so get us to day of show, day one.
Yeah.
What time are you loading in? What's load in like for you on a day like S&M2?
Yeah, so I got there early because I wanted to set up and get in the room, and then hopefully even get an opportunity to do a sound check just to hear what it's like in the room. And so I think I got there at about 1:00, and the rehearsal was scheduled to be, I think, from 3 to 5 or something like that. So I got there, ways before the rest of the orchestra, and Mick had asked me to come early. And so I did that and plugged in, and we got a test run, and then Mick came down from the main board and then was just making a few tweaks on the knobs, and then we got it all dialed in, and we were really happy with it. And Lars was not there for that. It was just me playing at that point. And then we did the rehearsal. And then I did then Lars and I, just to get levels, we just ran through the part where he comes in. We just played a little bit of that. And then we continued on running the show, and then we had a long break, and then the show.
Wow.
And I started so we had dinner. They provided dinner for us backstage, and then catering, I kind of started, catering, and I started to kind of fall asleep. Took a little nap.
Nap time.
A little bit of nap time. Yeah, which is surprising because I was very excited, but I wasn't that nervous. And times when I would start to get nervous, I would just remind myself to breathe and relax.
Yeah.
And
were you thinking about the fact that, so first of all, there's 2 shows to play in front of 2 sets of 18,000 fans or 20,000, whatever the cap was. Secondly, you're aware they're making a record and a DVD.
Yeah.
What made you more nervous? I mean, like the performance side of the disappointing fans or elating fans, or the fact that it's going to live on in posterity in the form of a record?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, Sigmund Freud wrote about that. He wrote an article, I believe, called "Wrecked by Success," and how like the fear of success can destroy people far more than the fear of failure. But which is complicated, I guess. But I didn't really think about any of that stuff. I tried not to. Because it could become a distraction.
Well, it was hard to because you were tired because it was nap time.
It was nap time. Yeah. No, actually, one of my colleagues said to me, he's like, "Man, I'd be a nervous wreck. I saw you over there and you're like falling asleep." And I was like, "Yeah, well, I was kind of tired and I just kind of was going in the zone and kind of just thinking about the solo and just kind of running through it in my head. And I just started to kind of doze off a little bit, but
that's pretty funny, dude.
Yeah, well,
I
would be lying if I said I was always that way, because there's been other times where I've been extremely nervous and feeling like I'm almost coming unglued. And but no, that was not really the case there. And I was just really excited to get there, and I was just kind of in the zone, and I had done my homework and was ready to do it, and I was really excited. Actually, I was more nervous for the second show, for the Sunday show.
Why?
I think because everybody was telling me about all the attention it was getting, and like, have you seen this comment and what this person wrote and this and that and this review?
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I don't want to know.
Well, you have the day out from between, so
right.
A lot of people had time to process what happened in the first night.
Yes.
So everyone's like critiquing the first show.
Which one was your better performance, Scott? Night 1 or night 2? In your opinion?
I don't know if there was some things I liked better about each one. I intentionally played it a little slower the second night because then I did finally allow myself to go listen to the first show on the next day.
You had the adrenaline, and maybe you played a little faster than you thought.
Yeah, I was really excited, and I played it a little bit faster than it's
like the speed metal version.
Yeah, somewhat. If you listen to both, it is a little bit faster when I get to the Cliff's main section.
Did the producers or Greg or whomever was in charge of this kind of thing, did anyone tell you, hey, FYI, we got what we needed for the album, so have fun night 2? Or did they say,
no,
hey, we'd love for night 2 to be solid also, so we can comp them both or whatever?
No, they were the only thing that was said to me is, man, that was awesome, we got one in the can, or it's in the can, or something like that.
Cool.
Yeah, that means you killed it the first night.
That means you did good, my friend.
If it was in the can, you're golden.
So then the second night, like, I'm warming up and it's like it was an hour and a half or so before the show, or 2 hours before the show, and then the guy Corey Groff from the Rolling Stone comes up to me, and someone introduced me, and he said he wanted to interview me, and then he said something about, I'm only the second person Lars has played that solo with since Cliff died, and or something to that effect, and I was like, oh. And then it just started, and then that started to kind of weigh on me a little bit.
Sure.
And so I did start to get nervous, and then it was about an hour or so before the show, and I just wanted to find a quiet place to go and
take a nap. Yeah.
Well, no.
Shut eye.
Yeah, exactly. No, I actually I found a nice quiet corner that was I was able alone and just kind of pray, and also and kind of run through it in my head just very calmly.
Sure.
And
you are such a sweet dude, Scott.
Oh, thanks.
Listen to you, man.
I mean, honestly, dude. I'm really, I'm very appreciative of your care into this performance.
Yeah, a lot of TLC,
into this composition,
a lot of TLC.
It's not just like you're getting on stage with the electric double bass and playing the solo verbatim. You're adding all these things to it. Like it almost, in my opinion, what you added to it are transitions between Cliff's parts.
Yeah.
It's like you have an intro, then all of a sudden the intro is into Cliff's first recognizable part.
Boo, 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 boo.
Right.
Yeah.
Then it goes out of that into something else, and it's these beautiful notes you're playing into the next part. It's such a great piece, man. You really, really did a great job.
Well, because it could have easily... Yeah, dude, Scott, for real. Ethan means it. I know this guy. He's a very sincere, nice, earnest person.
Oh, I mean it.
It could have easily have been like, oh, the band's looking for ideas. I'm a world-class bass player. I'll do something cool.
Right.
And by the way, none of us knew any of all this before thought stuff until Scott, you've talked to Ultimate Classic Rock and Rolling Stone, maybe, and now us. It's like hearing all the TLC is like, it's just so nice to know that
cool, yeah.
it was in the hands of someone who cared so much.
Oh, well, I cared a lot about it, and Cliff was a beloved human being, just like anybody, but he also touched a lot of people, and I wanted to, like I said before, I wanted it to be meaningful for everybody that knew him and loved him, and that includes me.
Were you able to talk to Ray or Casey after the performances?
Yeah, so after the Friday show, there was a reception in San Francisco at this club, and so I got to meet Ray there, and I spent most of the night with Ray.
Wow.
And we just had so much to talk about, and especially with my jazz background, and his favorite thing in the world is big bands.
Yeah.
And so we talked a lot about that, because I actually did play with some big bands in my younger years when I played with an orchestra called they called it an orchestra, the Dick Jurgens Jazz Orchestra, and nobody's ever heard of it, but he did. He knew exactly who I was talking about.
Wow.
I was just so amazed. They were like a popular band in the 1920s and 30s in the Midwest, and he knew exactly who they were.
Ray's a sharp cat.
Crazy.
Oh, he is a wealth of knowledge and just as sharp as a razor, man. He's just awesome. And then I played with the Tommy Dorsey Ghost Band, and I did a bunch, and he was just so excited about that. And we really hit it off. It was wonderful. And Casey was there, but she kind of let us go and do our thing. And then I think Ray outlasted me. I had to go to bed, and then because I had to get up for rehearsal, and Ray was like still going. And then I got to see him again Sunday. There was this private event after the show at the Chase Center, and Ray was there, and we chatted more, and that was really beautiful getting to hear from him and Casey. And they said that they loved it both nights, but it was even more sort of emotionally powerful for them the second night, because the first night it was just this pure excitement and the novelty of it all, because they hadn't heard it, and then the second night they were able to sink into it a little bit more. And and said that it brought him to tears, and that just brought me to tears, and it was just really, really sweet. And then I went to Lars's house, and I think I left Lars's house at a little after 4 a.m. Yeah, it was a fun night. And then I had to get up, and I had to go to the dentist. I'd waited 6 months for this dentist appointment. I'm not kidding. I had a 9:30 dentist appointment. I couldn't miss
9:30 the next day.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's pretty safe to say that you are now, whether you like it or not, a part of the Metallica family.
Yeah, you are, man.
Oh, well, that's a huge honor for me, and I love it. And they're just fantastic. They're really great guys, and I hope that I can spend more time with them in the future. I know certainly at least Rob and I will, and even actually Kirk and Rob and I even talked about. We were talking about the listening sessions that Kirk used to do with Cliff, and we talked about maybe bringing that back, because they said Cliff knew so much about classical music because his dad made sure he did, and Cliff loved it too, and they were like, we want to learn more about it. These guys are curious and they're inquisitive, they were like, can we get together and do? So I hope that it'll very likely happen, and I think that would be a lot of fun.
It is a beautiful full circle aspect of all this, that Cliff brought that to the table in Metallica at such an early age, and then it was taken away from us, obviously so young. But it's almost like a lot of the seeds he planted at that level of musical depth is kind of what's made Metallica enduringly interesting all these years later.
Agreed.
And set them apart from all their peers. It really comes from the harmonic influence of Cliff, and that's because Cliff
and the forms in the music too.
Right. Yeah. And I love that you saying, Scott, that you were hearing Bach and you didn't even know that Cliff knew Bach. The thread is there, dude.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's so cool. All right, well, we don't want to take up too much more of your time. We have some questions from patrons, if that's okay with you, Scott.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
And then I want to talk to you personally for another 6 or 7 or 8 hours, if that's cool.
Anytime, man. Give me a call.
So Chris Urgis asks, other than your solo, were there any moments during the show that were highlights for you, both musically and from a crowd energy perspective? That's a good question.
Can you run that by me one more time? Sorry.
So other than your solo, which I imagine, even when you're playing all the other songs, you're thinking about that moment's coming. But he's saying, other than that moment, your big moment, were there any other moments in the show that were highlights for you? Whether it was musically, stuff you were playing that you loved, or a Metallica song that you loved, or maybe the crowd's response to something.
Oh, I think there are aspects of all of the above. But it's musically speaking, playing a lot of the classics that I listened to, like when I was younger, that I grew up with, like One, in particular, because that was when And Justice for All came out. That was like my first Metallica album, and then I kind of went backwards from there because that was the first album and that tune in particular, I loved it, and so that was just I love it, and also just the nostalgic aspect of it was really nice for me. Call of Cthulhu is just
beautiful
awesome.
Beautiful piece,
beautiful, and that is a very symphonic piece.
Yeah, that's a deep song for sure.
Very, very, and I kind of wish that they would have done an orchestral arrangement of Orion.
Yeah, we do too. We do too. I know.
Yeah, so maybe S&M2 can do that.
Yeah. Hey, well, you heard it here first, folks. Rolling Stone.
Yeah, I'll push for it. I'll see what I can do.
Were there any moments of crowd response? I mean, I know you had those like tight in-ears in, but were there any crowd moments where you were like, "Holy shit, I wasn't expecting that"?
Even with my in-ears, I can hear the crowd, and occasionally I would pull them out just to hear the full force of the crowd. And yeah, it's wild being at the center of that, like it's all aimed at you, all that sound and that energy. Right. And it was amazing. The fans were just incredible, and they're so dedicated. And also that there was no barricade. There was like had this connection with the audience. There wasn't like this offense between us and them, and we're walking out amongst the fans, and so it just felt more collaborative. That's because cool. Frankly, as a musician, it's important to have your you think a lot about what it is you're doing, but that's only half the equation. You need the other half. You need someone to receive it, and it's reciprocal. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely.
And so you're giving to them and they're giving back, and it's a beautiful thing.
That's so cool.
More wisdom from Tony Scott Pingel Robbins. Chris has one more question that is, did other members of the symphony, or even just you, understand how big and how important this gig was in the Metallica world? We kind of touched on that a little bit, but
I think you knew, obviously.
Yeah, I had an idea that it was going to be a big deal, and also that kind of helped in some aspects drive what I was doing. I mean, I wanted it to be good for its own sake and it being good, but also recognizing, how big of a project this was.
Right.
And so, for me to have that exposure and have that opportunity to, as I said, try to do something like the solo, I took it very seriously for all those reasons.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, and speaking of that solo, the next question ties into that. One of the patrons, Nicole Williams, asks, could you feel the love from the crowd while you were playing the solo? Was it evident how much this meant to the fans and the band? And she also says, I personally was covered in goosebumps.
Awesome. I did my job.
Absolutely, you did.
Yeah, you definitely did, yeah.
So when I first, when James introduced that I was coming up, and of course then he mentioned a tribute to their fallen brother, Cliff Burton, people got excited, and then, I bring the thing up there and I set it up and I start playing, and people are whooping and cheering, but they don't quite know what to expect. And, when it really was really cool was when I first started playing that first really recognizable Cliff lick, and I heard the audience respond to that. Yeah. When I felt that, I felt a much more intimate connection with the audience. But honestly, it was weird. I was aware of them, but I wasn't necessarily preoccupied with them. I was really focused on what I was doing, but it was like I was also aware of them at the same time, and it was really cool.
Yeah, you said you should be, which is I almost said you can't be. Like, you almost can't be self-conscious about that when you're doing the work you're supposed to be doing.
Well, I mean, when you just said, when you're doing the work you're supposed to be doing, the crowd reaction is almost like, it's like the bonus.
Yes,
like
exactly.
You're immersed in what you're doing, and all of a sudden this this reaction from a crowd starts to not overtake, but it starts to kind of
supplements. Yeah,
it supplements what you're doing, and all of a sudden then the two kind of blend together, and you can work with that, and it almost fuels what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And watching your performance just on YouTube, I mean, I definitely felt that.
Well, I agree with everything you said, Ethan. Well said. Well said, everybody. So I have Jesse House wanted to just make a statement, and then I have another question from Greg. So Jesse says, No questions for me, but you can let Scott know that I wept both nights during Anesthesia. That has never happened to me during a concert before. It was incredible.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, Scott,
Wow.
this is not an anomaly in crowd reaction to your performance. It was a moving piece, dude.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Well, it's giving me goosebumps just hearing that, so that's really sweet.
One guy wrote an email to us, and I think we read it last week, but he said, I cried during it, and don't tell my wife because she's still mad that I didn't even cry at our wedding.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Yep.
Wow.
Greg Staso asks, he says, and you touch on this a little bit, but maybe we can camp out for a minute. He says, have you studied Cliff's playing and song structure writing, and what's your opinion of it? It sounds like you have studied it and you think it's awesome, but is there any particular takeaway from diving in deep and as a world-class musician yourself, what you can take away from Cliff who was taken away at such a young age, but was obviously almost like the Jimi Hendrix of bass for his time and his age?
Yeah, certainly, yeah. Well, I mean, even just, like I was saying before, I could hear the classical influence so much in his playing, not only in his note choices and shaping of sort of motives or small little snippets of music that are sort of the building blocks of music, of pieces, but also his sense of form and structure. Like always with his Anesthesia, there's like this sort of there's this intro, and then there's motion, and there's a complicated time signatures in it too. I mean, it's not just straight ahead. I mean, like sometimes there's these odd meter bars that go in there, and it's really inventive and very clever. But really, it's just super cool. I mean, that's just that's the easiest way to put it. And then he goes into these fast sections that mean another thing, and then it takes into this kind of funky rock and roll section that's full of soul and sort of blues riffs, and he's just a fantastic musician. What more can I say?
Yeah,
Are you able to do that when you want to get into it? Say you're playing like an electric bass, like a more standard rock and roll bass. Are you able to do that kind of fast alternate picking thing that he did, like in Whiplash? Are you like? Do you have the dexterity for that?
Though.
And he was doing his fingers. That's right.
Ironically, this week at the San Francisco Symphony, I'm actually playing electric bass on one piece that the composer John Adams, very famous American composer, he wrote this piece for the orchestra, and he wrote a very prominent electric bass part to it. And so I do play electric bass occasionally. I still have my Modulus 6-string that I've had since 1991, and I get it out every now and then.
When are you auditioning for the Dave Matthews Band? Anytime soon?
Is there an opening?
Are you a fan of Dave Matthews Band at all? Oh yeah, totally. What about Tool, Justin Chancellor? Are you into Tool at all?
I can't say that I know that band as much. It's not like I'm not interested in those things. It's just I'm so preoccupied with so much. It's hard for me to.
Who are your favorite bass players in the rock world, or other than Cliff Burton, if we could ask?
Well, of course, I guess if you would want to call it rock, but there's Les Claypool,
right?
Of course,
Yes,
so brilliant.
Also Bay Area guy.
Oh, I didn't know he was Bay Area. That's interesting. Of course, Rob Trujillo, he's just awesome. I love Jason Newsted as well. I'm going to kind of limit myself a little bit because as I said before, I'm a little out of the loop at this point. I can maybe name some of the older guys, but
Flea.
I was going to get to that. Yeah, Flea, of course, is another legend. In fact, I was just talking about Flea with Robert when you guys called. we were actually talking about him a little bit.
Hey, since you brought it up, Scott, I do want to point out to all of you Metal Up Your Podcast family out there, when we called Scott to do this talk, Scott was talking to Robert, and Scott had to get off the phone with Robert to talk to us. So take that, Rob Trujillo.
Yeah.
Let's conference call in Flea and Robert Trujillo right
Next
now.
time you want to talk to Scott, you make an appointment, motherfucker. That's how we do things here. All right, we got a few more questions from patrons here.
Yeah. So the next one is from, this is not necessarily a question, more of a sentiment, but this is from Tom Trinkheller. He says, I was absolutely beside myself watching that. Singing your bass solo. One of the most emotionally overwhelming things I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Not only is this rendition brilliant, but the physical performance was phenomenal. As someone who identifies with Cliff strongly, John as a person, as well as he's the reason I started playing bass, I just wanted to say thank you. I was simultaneously moved to tears and giddily giggling with joy. He also read your Ultimate Classic Rock interview, so he had a little bit more of a connection to it.
Yeah, that's cool, Scott. Awesome. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Love it.
Alex Van
That's
Dyke
beautiful.
says, this is similar, and we've touched on some of this before too. He says, when you were young, do you remember your first exposure to Metallica and your initial thoughts on hearing Anesthesia for the first time? So you were in a band with your sister, and maybe your siblings are turning you on to this. Do you remember some of those first moments?
Yeah, well, I knew actually before I got in the band with my sister, I played in a garage band with some guys. There was a guy down my street, and they were looking for a bass player, and they knew that I had played cello at one point. And they're like, we need a bass player. Can you get a bass? And so that's how I got the bass. And we played some Led Zeppelin tunes and some of our own stuff. And we covered a bunch of different things. And so at that point, when I was like around 15 years old, that's when I was getting familiar with Metallica, and that was the Injustice for All album. And the tune One in particular was one that I just really stands out in my mind.
It's a top 5 compositionally. It holds
definitely.
up, hands down.
Yeah, definitely.
And his second thing is more of a comment, which we like relating these comments to you. He says, hearing your performance live, the similarity to Cliff's sound was so impressive that I closed my eyes and it really felt like Cliff's spirit was in the building with us as you played. That's awesome.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's
cool. Wonderful. Yeah, there was thank you. Thanks to him for that very nice comment. There was also another thing that sort of showed me what the scale of what this was is the number of people from around the world that came to the live show.
Absolutely.
Oh, God.
I mean, I was just blown away. The people that I met after the show that like from Scotland and from Australia and Poland. I mean, just like all over the place. And there was a lady that came up to me that had a sort of Eastern European sounding accent. She didn't ever say where she was from. And she had just tears streaming down her face. And she gave me a hug and says, "You just have no idea what you've done for me." And I was just like, and so I just gave her a hug. I didn't know what else to do. And I thanked her.
That's an appropriate
It was really
response.
sweet. Yeah, it was really sweet.
Well, there's one last question from our patrons. That's a guy named Chad Hogg. He's asked, did you avoid using an instrument with a large resonant body because it would have too much feedback? Speaking of
Which
the
we already
electric
sort of
bass,
talked about that, yeah.
we kind of talked about it, but was that kind of the
exactly.
main reason for going with the electric bodiless bass?
That was the main reason. And then when I started wondering like, I started second guessing it, like, could I have done it on an upright bass? And then Edwin, the conductor, said, "Oh no, this is way more metal looking." I said, "Yeah, you're right. This looked more appropriate
because it's thin and like the neck is black and it is kind of like
basically just a neck.
It looks like an H.R. Giger like painting come to life.
It's right. It's like a stick with strings on it, and and actually because of the way it's built. There is a shoulder that's on the near side of me, so that because you have these reference points as an acoustic double bass player that are part of your proprioception, I think is the technical term, knowing where you are on the instrument. These reference points, and when you have playing that instrument, it was drastically different because that's not there. So they made this shoulder attachment for the right side of the instrument from the player's perspective, left side from the audience perspective. And so that leans against my body. But then there's another attachment that goes on the other side that was supposed to be a reference of where the other shoulder would be and would let my arm know where the break is and, as you go up into the higher positions. But they didn't send that to me. And so I just got used to it without it. And in the end, I actually liked it better without it because it was faster. I could kind of fly around on it a little faster without a speed bump there.
You're so punk rock, dude. I don't need the other half of this bass.
Yeah.
My last question with you, Scott, is like, how do you think, and in not like superficial ways, but like, how do you think your life's going to be different now? I mean, you've made a big splash in the hard rock community. You've made inroads with some of the band. You've talked about collaborating with some of the band. What's next for you in light of S&M2?
Well, you never know where life will take you. I mean, I never imagined being where I am now, and something may come of it, something might not. I don't know. This the Bible teaches, this too shall pass. Like everything has its season, and I'm enjoying it. And if something does come out of it, that would be great. I would love to explore new things. And I've been playing in the symphony orchestras for quite a while now, and I would love to explore. Doing other things, and so we'll see.
Well, I have and I'm not kidding with you. I have a side project called Lunar Satan. It's a metal project about Satan in space, and it's all silly. It's all a big joke. Because I don't really believe in Satan or anything. But I would love to have you play on a Lunar Satan jam.
All right. You send me the tracks.
Maybe that's what it's all led to.
That's the next step.
Maybe. Yes.
And then Rob will hear that and be inspired, and you guys will collaborate on a double bass Christmas record.
Yeah.
A Yuletide record, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Scott, you've been so generous with your time and with your information.
Oh, it's been fun. It's really fun.
Thank you.
You've been such a surprising and wonderful addition to the family that we didn't even know we were missing you.
Yeah.
And now here you are after S&M2, and you've taken your time to be on our podcast. And I know that thousands of our listeners are going to absolutely love hearing about you and your story. And what can we say, man? I hope our paths cross again soon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would love that. Maybe we can meet one day.
And you mentioned, the symphony goes on the road. If you guys come through Nashville, please hit us up.
Yeah.
As we said before, Clint and I both tour. Come to the Bay Area. We'd love to hang out.
Yeah. Please. Yeah, please make sure to point. You have my number. That would be a blast.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, I mean, I'm from California. I'm from Southern California. My wife is from the Bay Area, so I spend a lot of time out there. So I'd love to meet up.
No,
sometime.
seriously. Yeah, seriously. If you're out here, let's do it.
And we look forward to hearing your new surf album with Robert Trujillo.
Yes.
Coming out this Christmas.
Exactly.
All right, Scott. Well, thank you so much for your time. Get back to your family, and good luck with you down the road in the symphony and otherwise. And I'm sure we'll see you for a beer soon, homie.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be great. I'll look forward to it, man. This has been my pleasure.
All right. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Well, there you have it, guys.
What a sweetheart.
Scott Pingel. What a dude. His story blows my mind. I mean, there's so many things to dissect in that interview, conversation, whatever you want to call it. One of the things that blows my mind is the audition process that he had to go through to get in that symphony.
So rigorous.
Like the things, you and I have done auditions in Nashville, and in our minds, those are like stressful and like, oh God.
Stressful, degrading.
Hope I get it.
Yeah.
And then he tells us that story, and it's like, well, we have it easy.
I've never had to communicate with the band leader or the artist via like, a liaison
or behind a screen. Would that be easier for us if you went to if like, let's say Miranda Lambert, hey, Clint Wells, I'd love for you to audition for my band. Great, you learn 3 songs. You show up. By the way, there's a screen. You're going to be behind that.
There's something kind of comforting about it being a screen, because I'm lucky. I've only done 2 auditions in my 10 years here,
right?
And I got both of them, which I know is not the case for many people. I know that you've had some auditions, like super talented people. I just got lucky. It's not because I stand above any of that, but
sure.
I will say, even in the 2 that I got, they were horrible experiences.
They're not that fun.
Because in one of them, kind of like what Scott was saying about when he went to HQ, it wasn't just Lars and Rob and Kirk. It was also 20 other managers and assistant. It was like a whole team of people.
Yeah, they were in the middle of doing their own band rehearsals for the show.
It was Tex. It was Zach and Chad. And, I've had auditions where there was like management team and there was booking agent team. And
yeah.
I don't know. That's stressful too, but you kind of know what you're there to do, and you've obviously prepared if you're doing it, and so you just hope you get it. But with a screen in front of you, I don't know, something scary and comforting about it. What do you think about the screen?
The unknown behind the screen.
Ooh, the unknown.
Who's back there?
Just members of the symphony.
It's Scott back there.
It's just Scott.
It's just Scott
back there playing with his pedals, like trying to figure out the wah pedal.
Yeah. No, that was honestly one of the most fun interviews we've done. I think.
No, for sure.
He was such a good dude, very humble, a very true musician, in my opinion. Like he, obviously, he is leaps and bounds above us as far as his knowledge of music theory.
Maybe you,
maybe me. No, but I mean,
I'm not in the San Francisco Symphony by choice. I'll just put it that way.
I'm not in it by restraining order.
No, he's obviously a deep cat musically, for sure.
He is, yeah. But what I love about people like him is that, he's got this knowledge of classical music. He can sight read like it's another language. But he also loves Metallica, loves Cliff solos. He loves, rock and roll music. He's not a snob where he's like, he only listens to certain, composers and symphonies. His taste in music is very vast.
I agree, and I actually loved what he had to say about the elitism of some of that genre of music,
right,
and how it's a little short-sighted. And
yep.
I thought that was really open-minded and cool and interesting, and I don't know. I couldn't have been happier with talking to Scott.
It was a blast. I mean,
and it sounds like we're all best friends now too. So
we're totes best friends.
Another couch to crash on in San Francisco.
I already booked a ticket. I'm flying there tomorrow.
I already live with Scott.
Yeah, you're there. We're on the phone right now. Clint, how's the Bay Area weather right now?
Well, listen, if you like Metal Up Your Podcast, leave us a positive review on iTunes. If you like the content we work hard to put out for you every Monday, when these kinds of things happen, Ethan and I get together and we seek out people like Scott. We seek out people like Chad Z and Ray Burton and et cetera. And, it's a labor of love, and we love it. If you want to support the show, leave a positive review. If you really like the show, then go join us on Patreon, where you can ask people like Scott Pingel questions.
That's right. And if you extra love the show, then join the symphony. And be friends with Scott.
That's all you have to do.
That's all you got to do. It's really easy. Just go behind a screen and play your instrument, and you'll get it.
Think about how many people are weeded out by the brutality of that process.
What do you say that like it's like 200 people ish?
Well, he said there's a resume process, then there's the video process, and you have to make all that. Then there's the do it in person in front of the screen, and then even if you kind of make that, they still have to vote on it.
But then when you get the job...
Then you get the gig, and it's a whole year of a probationary year.
That's the first year. And the second year was like another
voting weird year, and then the third year is when you finally get to get some tenure.
So year 3, you basically have the gig solidified. Like
year 3 is when they've decided, like, after 3 years, we know that this person's not a psychopath. Which is not a good...
That's insane.
That's not a good test for psychopathy.
I mean, year 3 of me being in certain bands, I was like in the photos and on records and
totally
as a band member,
in the press kit and shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
God, we have it easy, I guess.
Right.
Oh well. But
it'd be like me and you now at this point in the podcast, someone above us going, "Okay, you can do a Metallica podcast."
Right now we're basically about 9 months into like approval.
Right. We just got past in front of doing the podcast in front of a screen stage.
Yeah, the screen happened. The first year was, the probation period.
Right.
And the second year was a little bit of that, but now we're in. Like now we can't get fired. Well, we're here as long as we want to be.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
As long as we have people like out there who listen and who care about the show.
That's right. But we can't thank Scott and obviously his family enough for taking the time away from his schedule to talk to us.
He's a sweetie.
His awesome wife and his kids just rearranging their schedule to allow Scott to take the time to talk with us for a good while.
He probably told his family that we were Rolling Stone.
He's like, listen, Look, I'm about to talk to TRL.
Sorry, the New Yorker is calling.
Yeah. The Washington Post is called. I'm getting interviewed by Carson Daly.
Ariana Huffington literally just called me. Ariana Grande Huffington. We're at the point now, Ethan, my friend, where I literally have to leave your house. I have to go home now.
Well, I would literally allow you to. Please leave my house.
We love you out there at Metal Up Your Podcast land. Thank you for all your support. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
We couldn't do it without you. We'll see you on the flip flop. And with that, let's just get out of here and say peace.
Adios.
You were our advisor, what would you say? Then I would say delete that.